Chapter 878. I won't do it again. I definitely won't let Miss Lee worry anymore. Wait until I get rid of those hateful people, then we'll go sightseeing and won't care about these things anymore. At that time, wherever Miss Lee wants to go, I'll go with her. Mo Shuyao hurriedly promised while silently plotting in his heart. So it was Helian Ping who revealed his secret. Very good, very good. The extremely vengeful Prince Ding heavily marked Helian Peng's name in his heart. Although these years had been neither fast nor slow, Mo Shuyao's conviction to get rid of certain people was extremely firm. Yili didn't care about him. Compared to those unrelated people, the most important thing was that the man in front of her was safe. Okay, I'll wait for you. Mo Shuyao secretly let out a sigh of relief. Miss Lee rarely got angry, but once she got angry she was very hard to appease. Women like jewelry, gifts and sweet words were all useless to her. However, seeing Yili so worried about him, Mo Shuyao's heart was extremely happy. He intimately rubbed his nose against Yili's slender neck, and left a soft kiss on her lips. Miss Lee, it's so good to have you by my side. Don't leave me. If he didn't meet her in his life, Mo Shuyao couldn't imagine what his life would be like. There would be a day when he wouldn't be able to endure the hatred and viciousness in his heart. He wouldn't hesitate to use the fastest speed to destroy the Dechu state, destroy the entire world and even destroy the Mahist army and the Prince Ding mansion. It was because he had Yili that he wanted to be with Miss Lee forever. He wanted to see Miss Lee live a happy life by his side. Later on he had Mo Xiaobao. Although that little bastard was mischievous and always went against him, making people wish he was never born. However, he still wanted to see him grow up safely and then harm others. He didn't want Mo Xiaobao to be like him in the past, hiding in the dark and silently using hatred to nourish the viciousness in his heart. It was precisely because of these that he was able to slow down his pace step by step to calculate and balance, slowly strengthening the power of Prince Ding's residence, allowing himself to be invincible in this chaotic world before going to eliminate those people that he hated bitterly. He didn't want to die together with them from the start. Mo Shuyao's soft muttering contained a deep infatuation that made Yili unable to help being moved. In her previous life, this life, two lives when someone's is as deeply as Mo Shuyao. Not because of her family, nor was it because of her ability, but because of her as a person's yi, est. As for herself, when even if she knew that the man in front of her was never as harmless as he appeared to be in front of her, and even if his heart contained endless hatred and viciousness. If it was in the past, she would have long treated him as a future criminal with antisocial tendencies and carefully guarded against him. But now she was only worried that he would hurt himself because of this. Idiot, other than by your side, where else can I go? Supporting his handsome face, Yili raised her head and slowly kissed those slightly cold thin lips. Xiao, I love you. Do you understand? In my heart you are the most important. No matter what you are the person I love. Mo Xiao was stunned. He was indescribably ecstatic by these heavenly words that fell from the sky. He held the back of Yili's head and took the initiative to deepen the kiss. Li, I love you. Mo Xiao will only love you in this lifetime. In the large tent, a husband and wife who had been married for 10 years, a pair of lovers tightly hugged each other, deeply moved. Reporting to Prince Wang Fei, Feng Jiao requests an audience. Outside the large tent, Feng Jiao's voice was neither loud nor soft, but it happened to interrupt the two of them. Mo Shuyao's face instantly darkened. He wanted to throw Feng Jiao tens of thousands of miles away. Seeing him like this, Yili couldn't help but smile. She pushed Mo Shuyao in and stood to tidy her clothes. Mo Shuyao finally let Feng Jiao in with a dark face. Stepping into the large tent, Feng Jiao felt a wave of cold resentment hit him in the face. When he raised his head to look at Mo Shuyao who was staring at him, he felt confused. Was the prince in a bad mood because he was scolded by Wang Fei? But, after being scolded by his wife, he vented his anger on his subordinate. Was this really what a gentleman would do? But young Master Feng San clearly overestimated Prince Ding's character. Even if he vented his anger on him, His Highness Prince Ding wouldn't feel the slightest bit of guilt. Moreover, someone had interrupted his good deed. Mo Shuyao stared darkly at Feng Jiao. Feng San, what is it? It had better be something. If Feng Jiao dared to say that he was here to drink and chat with him, he should prepare to go back and pack his things and hide in the western regions for the rest of his life. Feng Jiao raised an eyebrow. He really did have something important to say. I just received news that Helianjin has secretly left the northern militant camp and gone south. Mo Shuyao raised an eyebrow. Go south? What is Helianjin going south for? Helianjin had never been to Jiangnan in his life. Wouldn't he get lost? Feng Jiao rolled his eyes in annoyance. Did a certain someone's brain start to malfunction as soon as Wang Fei returned? We are at war and the northern militant people are still retreating. Helianjin is not staying in the camp and is going south. Prince, do you think he is traveling? Mo Shuyao finally pulled himself back from his earlier joy and hatred towards Feng Jiao. He said lightly, he wants to ally with Lei Jinting to deal with the Prince Ding mansion. Congratulations, Prince, so your brain is still intact. Feng Jiao mocked in annoyance. Mo Shuyao stared at him and suddenly revealed a sinister smile. Feng-san, I noticed that you have been very dissatisfied with I recently. Feng Jiao couldn't help but tremble. Only now did he remember that the person in front of him had never been a magnanimous person who did not hold grudges. He was indeed very dissatisfied with Mo Shuyao, but there was no need to let him know and create more dissatisfaction in the future. Most importantly, if Mo Shuyao really wanted to punish someone, he would not be able to handle it. Mo Jingli, who had been unlucky since he was young and had a twisted personality, was Yin Jian. How could that be? Prince's virtues match the heavens and earth, and his might is awe-inspiring. I can't wait to admire you. Feng Jiao smiled apologetically. Hypocrite. Mo Shuyao snorted softly. Feng Jiao looked speechlessly at the sky. You can be happy all the time. Being hypocritical once in a while was nothing. What are you talking about? Yili came out from inside and looked curiously at the two people with different expressions. Feng Jiao looked at the Wang Fei who had come out, and then looked at the gloomy and unhappy Mo Shuyao. He rubbed his nose and suddenly felt that he understood. Wang Fei Helianjin is secretly heading south. This subordinate is asking the prince whether to send people to intercept him. Feng Jiao said seriously. Hearing this, Yili looked at Mo Shuyao. Mo Shuyao said lazily, why stop him? Even if we stop Helianjin, there will be others. Even if there isn't, we will still have to fight Lei Jinting sooner or later. Feng Jiao looked at Mo Shuyao with some difficulty and said, even if we have to fight Lei Jinting sooner or later, to fight two at the same time now, isn't it a bit? Fighting one at the front and one at the back was definitely easier than fighting two powerful countries at the same time. Mo Shuyao looked at him with a smile and shook a finger. He smiled and said, it's not two, it's three. Do you think Mo Jingli is a pushover? Hearing Mo Shuyao's words, Feng Jiao couldn't help but change his expression. The Mahist army might be able to win against the northern tribes alone, but with Lei Jinting it would be difficult. There was also Mo Jingli. No matter how stupid Mo Jingli was, he still had millions of soldiers. Even if the three of them added together were millions of pigs, it would be enough to trample the Mahist army to death. Prince. Mo Shuyao waved his hand and smiled. Don't worry, it's been so many years. I still can't beat them. I'm just afraid that you will play us to death. Feng Jiao cursed in his heart as he glanced at Yili. Yili lowered her head and pondered, but her mind didn't stop calculating the current situation. If we end this quickly, will we be able to finish off the northern tribes first? Mo Shuyao shook his head and smiled. Since Helianjin has left, Yellow Yi will definitely not come out in the future. It's impossible to end this quickly. Yellow Yi wasn't a brute who would rush out and fight to the death. If he wanted to hide in his shell and not come out, there was no way to do so in a short period of time. It's not just Genom of Gojoseon and Mo Jingli. I'm afraid that Yellow Yi has already sent people to the royal house of the northern tribes to ask for help. Feng Jiao's face darkened. Why don't you just tell me how many soldiers we have to face? I want to know what else I have to tell you. Mo Shuyao hugged Yili and laughed. Don't worry so much. It's hard to say if the reinforcements from the royal house of the northern tribes will come. Yili raised her eyebrows. Yelu Hong. Mo Shuyao nodded. That's right. Even if Yelu Hong wants to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight, he still has to worry about whether Yellow Yi will send all the soldiers of the northern tribes into the bottomless pit that is the Central Plains. Ever since the northern tribes attacked the Dechu state 2 years ago, Yellow Yi had mobilized no less than 1.5 million soldiers from the northern tribes. Now Yellow Yi only had less than 700,000 soldiers. A total of 700,000 to 800,000 soldiers were sent into the Central Plains. In reality, the benefits that the royal house of the northern tribes received were very limited. Feng Jiao finally relaxed a little. He nodded and said, "That's good. But, since the prince doesn't plan to stop Hellion Jin, shouldn't we make some preparations?" Not to mention that the Mahist army had less than 1 million soldiers under their command to deal with the allied forces of the 3 countries. If that was the case, Feng Jiao felt that he should really go and die first. Mo Xiuyao pondered for a moment, then asked, "Li, how many soldiers can we recruit now?" Yi Li calculated for a moment, then said, "It will take at least 2 months. We should be able to recruit 1 million soldiers. After that, we can send another 500,000 to 600,000 soldiers to the battlefield. Any more and I'm afraid that it will damage the foundation of the Prince Ding mansion." The reason why the Mahist army didn't have many soldiers was because the Prince Ding mansion used a lot of resources to manage the people's lives. In this way there were advantages and disadvantages. The disadvantage was that they didn't have enough soldiers. The Mahist army valued quality over quantity. The advantage was that the Prince Ding mansion had all kinds of resources under their command. They had a strong ability and potential to sustain the war. Even if they fought for several years, they didn't have to worry about military supplies. It wouldn't even affect the lives of the people under the Prince Ding mansion. However, no matter how good a card was, if there wasn't a chance to play it, it would be a useless card. Therefore, if it really came to a life and death battle, even if it would damage the foundation of the people under the Prince Ding mansion's rule, they could only consider recruiting the people into the army. Mo Xiuyao thought for a moment, then said, "No need. First, transfer out 800,000 soldiers. The rest will be ready at any time. It won't be too late to replenish them after next year's spring plowing." Will this work? Feng Jiao was slightly worried. He felt that Mo Xiuyao's thinking was too optimistic. To not harm the people's lives and to win the war, how could there be such a good thing? Mo Xiuyao looked at him calmly and said, "It has to work even if it doesn't work. Or do you think this war can be finished in 2 or 3 months?" Feng Jiao rubbed his nose and didn't say anything. It was common for many wars to last 3 to 5 years once they started. The Mahist army had to deal with 3 countries at the same time. If they didn't leave some trump cards, even if they didn't lose on the battlefield, their own rear would be dragged out until the people had no way to make a living. He sighed helplessly and said, "I know." Reporting to the prince, Wang Fei, urgent news from Jiangnan. Outside the door, Zhuojing's voice had a trace of urgency. Yi Li suddenly had a bad feeling. She glanced at Mo Xiuyao and hurriedly said, "Come in and talk." Zhuojing hurried in with a letter in his hand. He said, "Wei Lin sent a pigeon. Master Qingchen has disappeared." Chapter 879. Wei Lin sent a messenger pigeon saying that young Master Qingchen's whereabouts are unknown. What? Hearing this, not just Yi Li, even Mo Xiuyao and Feng Jiao were greatly shocked. Yi Li's face paled as she stood up abruptly, almost falling to the ground. Mo Xiuyao hurriedly helped her to sit down, looking at Zhuojing and saying, "Speak clearly." Zhuojing hurriedly presented Wei Lin's letter as he said. After young Master Qingchen settled matters at Infinite Boundless Mountain, he brought Wei Lin's group north, preparing to return to Glass City. However, they were ambushed along the way. More than half of his guards were killed and Wei Lin was also heavily injured. Young Master Qingchen's whereabouts are unknown. Yi Li silently read through the news sent by Wei Lin. While there were only a few words, Yi Li understood the battle prowess of Wei Lin and Qi Lin. To be able to heavily injure Wei Lin, kill more than half of the dozens of Qi Lin and kidnap Su Qingchen, it was enough to prove that the other party was definitely not simple, and had clearly been planning this for a long time. This time, it was different from Su Qingchen's disappearance in Nanzhao a few years ago. At that time, Su Qingchen's capture was more or less within his calculations. Other than outsiders who did not know the truth, there were actually not many who were truly worried. However, this time the other party was able to snatch Su Qingchen from the hands of the Prince Ding Mansion's most elite, Qi Lin. They could not help but worry about Su Qingchen's safety. Mo Xiuyao supported Yi Li, saying softly, "Don't worry. If the other party wanted Brother Qingchen's life, they could have assassinated him on the spot. They would not have spent so much effort to take him away. Since they have already taken him away, they would naturally not harm him so easily." Yi Li closed her eyes, forcing herself to calm down. They were already too used to young Master Qingchen's unparalleled intelligence, his intellect like that of a celestial. However, they had forgotten that no matter how formidable Su Qingchen was, he was still just a scholar who did not have the strength to truss a chicken. His intelligence was built on the premise that his personal safety was not threatened. If a random young man who knew martial arts and was unreasonable came, young Master Qingchen would not be able to do anything. Big brother, Shuyao. Thinking that Su Qingchen might be in danger, Yili couldn't help but feel cold all over. Young Master Qingchen, the most outstanding man in recent generations of the Su family. Something happened to him. Yili could almost imagine what would happen to the entire Su family. After calming herself down, Yili held Emo Xiuyao's hand as if she wanted to draw some strength from it. Don't tell uncle and grandfather about this for now. Emo Xiuyao wasn't in the mood to be jealous and nodded. I know, Mr. Li, don't worry. Brother Qingchen is extremely intelligent. He won't get into trouble so easily. Feng Jiao glanced at Yili, who was on the verge of breaking down, and quietly left with Shuijing. In the large tent, Emo Xiuyao held Yili in his arms and let her lean against his chest. Emo Xiuyao's heart ached when he felt the slight wetness on his chest. He gently stroked her black hair and comforted her in a soft voice. Mr. Li, don't worry. I'll immediately send someone to find him. Nothing will happen. Yili said in a low voice. Big brother's ability is extraordinary. If it wasn't for me, the Su family and Big brother wouldn't have. Emo Xiuyao held her tightly and said, it's not Mr. Li's fault. It's all because of me. I've implicated Mr. Li and brother Qingchen. Mr. Li, don't blame yourself. It's my fault. But even if Mr. Li thinks I'm bad, you can't leave me. I won't let go. Looking at Yi Li's slightly red eyes, Emo Xiuyao said in a low voice. I won't leave you. Yi Li tightly grasped his clothes and said resolutely, as long as I'm alive I won't leave you. It's just that I'm very scared. Something really happens to Big Brother. We still don't know what happened. We're just scaring ourselves. Emo Xiuyao said with a faint smile. Mr. Li, don't you believe in your Big Brother's abilities? Do you think something will happen to him? Right now we should think about what to do. Yi Li quickly calmed down. Whether or not something happened, finding Su Qingchen was the most important thing. Otherwise, what was the use of crying her heart out here? After calming down, Yi Li asked, who do you think wants to capture Big Brother? Su Qingchen thought for a moment and said, in the south, there are only 3 parties that can kidnap someone from Wei Lin's hands. Lei Jinting, the Emperor of Xiling, and Emo Jingli. However, the Emperor of Xiling doesn't have the guts and there's no need for him to do so. Brother Su is still in his territory, so the first person we suspect is him. If he really wants to kidnap someone, he might as well just do it. Either way, we'll have a falling out, so there's no need for him to do such a sneaky thing. Then it's Emo Jingli? Yi Li's eyes flashed with a cold light. Why does he want to capture Big Brother? To threaten the Prince Ding mansion? Emo Xiuyao was also a bit confused. Emo Jingli was separated from them by Lei Jinting. Even if he captured Su Qingchen, what could he exchange it for with the Prince Ding mansion? He shook his head and said, Emo Jingli's way of thinking is hard to understand sometimes. Moreover, this is only our guess. I'm sure news will come from the south soon. Li, you don't need to worry. Yi Li nodded uneasily. After a moment of silence, Yi Li said, if there's still no news from Big Brother, I want to go to Jiangnan personally. Emo Xiuyao was stunned and didn't speak for a while. After a long time, just as Yi Li thought he was going to object, she heard Emo Xiuyao sigh softly and say, I can't go with you. Li, you must be careful. It's best if you can come back before the northern tribes and Western Hill form an alliance. Otherwise you will be in danger. Yi Li nodded and said in a low voice, don't worry, I will come back as soon as possible. Just as Emo Xiuyao said, the next morning, Wei Lin sent someone to deliver a secret letter from the south, explaining in detail what had happened. It turned out that Wei Lin was worried that something would happen to the messenger pigeon, so he sent someone to deliver the letter on a fast horse at the same time he sent the letter. After reading the letter, Yi Li and Emo Xiuyao's brows furrowed even tighter. Young Master Qingchen had disappeared from Lei Jinting's territory. Such a big matter couldn't have not alarmed Lei Jinting. The letter said that Lei Jinting actually had the intention to detain Wei Lin and the others. However, Yi Li wasn't worried about Wei Lin's safety. With their abilities, if they wanted to leave, no one could stop them. Even one of the top 4 experts in the world, Lei Jinting. Moreover, with Lei Jinting's status, he wouldn't personally make things difficult for Wei Lin and the others. After reading Wei Lin's letter, Yi Li could only sigh and say, It looks like I still have to go to Jiangnan personally. I'm only afraid that Big Brother has been taken to the Dechu state by Mo Jingli. Compared to Mo Jingli, Yili would actually rather deal with Lei Shenting. Lei Shenting was a smart person and smart people naturally knew what to do and what not to do. On the other hand, people like Mo Jingli would occasionally do things that he knew were impossible, but he always did things that he shouldn't do. Mo Shuyao also knew that Su Qingchen's safety was important, so he didn't say much and only said gently, "Be careful." Yili nodded and promised in a low voice, "I will return as soon as possible, don't worry." Chapter 880. That night Yili took Qin Feng, Zhuajing, Lin Han, Su Qingfeng, and 3 teams of Qilin to secretly leave the Mahist army's camp. They avoided the western hill and the northern tribes and took a boat from the east to Jiangnan. Along the way, the Mahist army's shadow guard continuously passed on information about Jiangnan to Yili. After knowing that Su Qingchen was indeed not in Lei Shenting's hands, Yili did not plan to provoke Lei Shenting. She directly took a boat across the river and went ashore. They arrived at the Dechu state under Mo Jingli's control. It was now called Southern Chu. The new Chu capital was not big. It was called Nanjing. However, it was where Mo Jingli's manor was when he was princely. After 2 years of governance, although the area was not big, it was much more prosperous. After all, the Dechu state had a deep foundation. It could not be compared to the northern territory, which was like a castle in the sky. Yili had disguised herself as a man in white. Now that Yili was getting older, she was different from when she disguised herself as a slightly childish young man in white. Although she was still as pretty as before, she looked elegant and refined with an outstanding aura. Compared to the world's #1 young master Qingchen, she was not much worse. Zhuajing, Lin Han, and the others were Yili's confidants. Naturally, they had seen many people and had also disguised themselves. There were more than a dozen people in the group. It looked like a family of subordinates following a noble young master on a trip. Although the Dechu state was now in a remote corner, it was still a place where people gathered. Their group did not attract much attention when they entered the capital. Wei Lin had arrived in Nanjing long before Yili and the others arrived. Although Nanjing was now under the control of Mo Jingli and the Boundless Mountain, it was inevitable that there would be many spies from the Prince Ding mansion. Naturally, they had already prepared a suitable residence. Not far from the Prince Regent's residence, there was a street full of rich and powerful people. The 2 words, Chu residence, were hung on the plaque above the gate. The people nearby only knew that the Chu family was originally a prominent family in Yunzhou. Although it was not as famous as the Su family, which had hundreds of years of history, it was still a scholarly family that had been passed down for several generations. This mansion was one of the other residences of the Chu family in Nanjing. In the past few days, when people saw people coming in and out, they naturally thought that the master of the Chu family had come to stay. Other than the nearby families sending people to deliver gifts, it didn't attract anyone's attention. Yili and the others settled down in the Chu mansion. Before they had time to rest, all kinds of information in Nanjing City were sent to the mansion. But what worried Yili was that it had nothing to do with Su Qingchen. The only thing that was clear was that a few days ago, there were indeed people who saw a group of people mysteriously crossing the Cloud Mist River with a person. But whether that person was young Master Qingchen or not and where those people went, no one knew. Looking at Yili's frowning appearance, Su Qingfeng comforted her. "Big Brother is lucky, it won't be so easy for something to happen. Lier, don't worry too much." In fact, when something happened to Su Qingchen, how could Su Qingfeng not be worried as the younger brother? However, seeing how worried Yili was, he had no choice but to comfort her. He was also very guilty. As the elder brother, he should have shouldered such a thing. But he also understood that he was still somewhat lacking compared to Yili. He also couldn't bear to see Yili suffer so much and care about Su Qingchen's situation. Yili helplessly shook her head and said, "If it wasn't for us, if it wasn't for the Prince Ding mansion, how could Big Brother have encountered such a thing?" Su Qingfeng nonchalantly shook his head and said, "The weather is unpredictable and people are uncertain. Big Brother's matter may not be because of the Prince Ding mansion. Maybe someone who coveted Big Brother's beauty kidnapped him to be the husband of the fort." Su Qingchen said this to make Yili laugh, but it made Yili involuntarily think of when Su Qingchen was kidnapped by Shu Manlin in Nanzhou. She couldn't help but smile and helplessly shake her head. While smiling, Yili's heart suddenly moved and she frowned slightly. Su Qingfeng saw her strange expression and hurriedly asked, "What's wrong? What did you think of?" Yili frowned and said in a low voice, "Get someone to investigate what Dong Fengyu was doing a few days ago." Although Su Qingfeng had only seen Dong Fengyu once at Mr. Qingyun's banquet, he had long heard of this woman who dared to pester his big brother like this. He frowned and said, "You suspect that it was Dong Fengyu who did it? But she is Emo Jingli's princess consort. How could Emo Jingli allow her to? She is also the young master of the infinite boundless mountain. Although the infinite boundless mountain's power in the western hill and the north is almost completely destroyed, its power in Jiangnan is not. Moreover, with close to 100 years of operation, its foundation is not weak. I'm afraid that even if she wanted to do something, Emo Jingli may not know." Yili said slowly. Originally, Yili did not suspect Dong Fengyu. Dong Fengyu's personality did not seem like someone who would do such a thing. But she neglected the fact that Dong Fengyu was a woman. After experiencing Su Qingchen's rejection and being forced to marry Emo Jingli, it was hard to say whether Dong Fengyu's personality would change. And Dong Fengyu herself was a disciple of the infinite boundless mountain's Feng Hui. Even Feng Hui had personally admitted that Dong Fengyu's intelligence was above hers. Once Dong Fengyu's personality changed and she was no longer as ignorant of the ways of the world as before, she would become someone even more terrifying than Feng Hui. Speaking of Dong Fengyu, Wei Lin frowned and said, "Dong Fengyu betrayed Dong Feng Hui." Hearing this, everyone immediately turned their gazes to Wei Lin. Wei Lin had followed Su Qingchen to the south this time and had always been by her side. The matter of dealing with the infinite boundless mountain this time was also handled by Su Qingchen. Yili and the others did not know the details. Hearing Wei Lin's words, they were shocked. Dong Fenghui had nurtured and taught Dong Fengyu. Even Dong Fenghui herself probably did not think that Dong Fengyu would betray her. Wei Lin said, "After the infinite boundless mountain was broken through, Dong Fenghui originally had a chance to escape back to Jiangnan. But we knew beforehand that the infinite boundless mountain had a few reinforcements at the Cloud Water River, and just happened to capture Dong Fenghui. Although the person who sent the letter to us did not appear, young Master Qingchen said that there was an 80% chance that it was Dong Fengyu. I really did not think that Lady Dongfeng would actually die at the hands of her most beloved disciple." After hearing Wei Lin's explanation, Yili could not help but sigh. Other than forcing Dong Fengyu to marry Su Qingchen, Yili did not have much ill feelings towards Dong Fenghui. After all, a woman who could single-handedly support the entire infinite boundless mountain was definitely outstanding in some ways. Compared to dying at the hands of her most trusted and beloved disciple, Dong Fenghui would probably rather die at the hands of Su Qingchen and Lei Tingfeng. This means that Dong Fengyu is extremely likely to have already grasped control of the remaining powers of the infinite boundless mountain. Then the possibility of Big Brother being in her hands is also much greater. Yili said in a low voice. Qin Feng asked rather suspiciously, with Dong Fengyu's appearance, would she be able to do such a thing? In Qin Feng's eyes, Dong Fengyu was completely a love-struck fool. Yili shook her head saying, Dong Fengyu's martial arts are above yours and mine. It is said that her medical skills are also not bad, and she is even proficient in the 4 arts of zither, chess, calligraphy, painting, strategy and military strategy. How can a woman who can learn so much be an idiot? It depends on whether she is enlightened or not. When she is not enlightened, she is just an idiot in the eyes of others. Once she understands everything, she is the most terrifying person. Dong Fenghui would probably never understand why Dong Fengyu wanted to kill her. Chapter 881. Sighing faintly, Yili said to Qin Feng, send a message to Yaoji, I have something to ask her. Qin Feng was stunned and nodded, as you command. In Nanjing City in the most upscale tea house, Zhaixing Lu, a beautiful young woman slowly walked in with an 8 or 9-year-old child, but everyone in the hall was attracted to them. This young woman was naturally Yaoji, the concubine of Marquis Muyang's mansion, and the young master of Marquis Muyang's mansion. Since the family moved to the south, Marquis Muyang was somewhat disheartened, so he passed the title of Marquis Muyang to his son Muyang. He only played with his grandson at home every day, living a carefree life. Muyang was also a very capable and ambitious person. Although Emo Jingqi was gone, Marquis Muyang's mansion gradually became closer to Emo Jingli. In the past 2 years, Marquis Muyang's mansion became more and more prosperous. and the news that the beautiful concubine of Marquis Myong's mansion was almost on the same level as the official wife naturally spread in Nanjing City. Yaoji became the object of all the official wives' hatred and the concubine's imitation. As soon as Yaoji came in, the shopkeeper hurried to greet her politely. "Madam Mu, young master, please come upstairs." Yaoji smiled sweetly. "Thank you, do you still have my room?" The shopkeeper smiled fawningly. "It's our blessing that Madam Mu likes the refreshments in this small building. Of course, I will always keep the room that Madam likes." Everyone in Nanjing City knew that although Marquis Myong had several wives and concubines, he only doted on this concubine. This Madame Yaoji was originally a dancer in Chu Capital's Qingqing Lane, known as the #1 dancer in Chu Capital. Her enchanting beauty was naturally not comparable to ordinary people. And because Marquis Myong doted on her, Madame Yaoji was very generous. Usually, even if she didn't come, she would ask someone to buy some refreshments every day. Zhaixing Lu was naturally willing to keep a room for her to show preferential treatment. Yaoji said with a smile, "Thank you," and went upstairs with the child beside her. All that was left was a fragrant silhouette and a clear and melodious laughter. When her figure disappeared upstairs, the people downstairs couldn't help but sigh in relief and talk among themselves. This Madame Yaoji is indeed worthy of being the #1 dancer in the past. Although she is not young, her beauty is something that even Princess Consort Li cannot compare to. Currently, one of the 2 princess consorts of Prince Li Rongfei Yiying was once known as the #1 beauty in the capital. But now the only thing that made people remember her was that she was Princess Ding's younger sister. How could she be compared to Yaoji, who was so gorgeous? Marquis Myong really has good luck with women. No wonder he dotes on Madame Yaoji so much. It was just a pity that Madame Myong was originally a young lady from a prestigious family, a delicate beauty. Unfortunately, he could only be overshadowed by Yaoji, who was radiant in all directions. Yaoji held Mu Lai's hand as they went upstairs. They entered the room that she usually sat in. Someone was already waiting for her inside. Seeing Yi Li sitting in the side room drinking tea, Yaoji couldn't help but smile and say, "Where did this handsome young master come from?" Yi Li looked at her with a smile and said, "Yaoji, it's been a long time since we last met. Mu Lai, come and sit down." Mu Lai still looked less than 10 years old, but he was already a little adult. He looked at Yi Li curiously and replied respectfully, "Yes, thank you, princess." Yi Li shook her head and looked at Yaoji saying, "How can you teach such a serious child with such a temperament?" Yaoji said helplessly, "How can I teach him? He is the one who teaches me." Yaoji also sat down. When she saw Qin Feng sitting not far behind Yi Li, she was slightly stunned and turned her eyes away as if she didn't care. Yaoji also knew that the war in the north was now rising. Yi Li came all the way to Jiangnan for a matter of great importance. She didn't talk nonsense and told Yi Li all the things that happened in Nanjing these days. After listening, Yi Li frowned and said, "You didn't have any news of my eldest brother in Nanjing?" Yaoji smiled helplessly and said, "After hearing the news of young Master Qingchen's disappearance, I have been carefully paying attention to the movements inside and outside the Chu capital, but there was no news of young Master Qingchen. Yaoji can guarantee that no matter whether young Master Qingchen was kidnapped by the people of Nanjing, at least, young Master Qingchen is definitely not in Nanjing at this time." Seeing Yi Li frown, Yaoji couldn't help but frown slightly. Speaking of which, this matter was indeed somewhat bizarre. Young Master Qingchen was not some random passerby like Brother Cat. No matter where he was very eye-catching. And with young Master Qingchen's intelligence, as long as he was still alive, he would leave some clues for them. But these days the people of the Prince Ding mansion almost searched the whole Jiangnan, but there was no news of young Master Qingchen. All of a sudden Yaoji remembered something. She said in a low voice, "By the way, before young Master Qingchen disappeared, I sent him a secret letter." Hearing this, everyone hurriedly raised their heads and looked over. Yaoji said, "The secret letter was sent from the Prince Regent's mansion. Because the princess and the prince are at the border, now the affairs of Jiangnan have been transferred to young Master Qingchen. So the secret letter was sent directly to young Master Qingchen. At that time, it was the second day after Dongfang Hui died. After Dongfang Hui was killed, the news came from the Prince Li's mansion." Yi Li said in a low voice. The timing was so coincidental. The news from Yiying was naturally related to Dongfang Yu. "Wei Lin, do you know what was written in the secret letter?" Wei Lin shook his head in frustration and said, At that time I was not with young Master Qingshan. Then young Master Qingshan asked me to go there, saying that he had something to tell me. But when I just arrived at the door, the assassin arrived. Then, the secret letter was either taken away by the assassin or destroyed by young Master Qingshan. Qin Feng said, "Now there is no bad news about Princess Li from the Prince Regent's mansion, so the secret letter should not be disclosed." Yi Li sighed helplessly and said, "Then we can only find a breakthrough from the Prince Li's mansion. Yaoji, is there any news about Immerse Li's son?" Yaoji nodded and whispered a few words in Yi Li's ear with a smile. Yi Li raised her eyebrows in surprise and said, "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." Yaoji smiled and said, "It was confirmed 2 months ago. But this news is too important, so I was worried that something might go wrong. I specially sent someone to personally send it back to Glass City. But I did not expect young Master Qingshan and the princess consort to come to Jiangnan one after another." Yi Li sighed and said, "It's not over yet. Mo Jingli has already gotten the antidote. In the future this news will be worthless." Yaoji covered her mouth and smiled, "That may not be so. Mo Jingli was drugged by Mo Jingqi. Even if there is an antidote, it will take some time for it to take effect. But that Prince Li is impatient. The moment he returned to Jiangnan, he took in 4 or 5 daughters of court officials. It's a pity that there has been no news. I heard that Prince Li suspects that Prince used fake medicine to deceive him and is suppressing his anger. Moreover, even if it doesn't work on the father, the child is always useful to the mother." Speaking of this, Yaoji could not help but sigh softly and sympathize with Yi Ying. As a mother she was strong. If not for her child, why would she give up her peaceful life in Glass City and stay in Marquis Muyang's mansion for so many years? Chapter 882. Prince Ding had long hated the Muyang Marquis mansion, but her son was Mu Yang's son. If she wanted her son to live a peaceful life, she could only be loyal to the Prince Ding mansion. What's more, Princess Ding saved her and her child's life and the Muyang Marquis mansion. Even if Mu Yang knew what those people did to her and her child, he would never do anything for them. He just pampered her in his own way. Mu Yang thought he loved her very much, or maybe he really loved her. But his love was no longer what she and her child needed. As early as when she returned to the Muyang Marquis mansion with Mu Lai, she was no longer the Yaoji who loved and hated Mu Yang. She was just a spy planted by the Prince Ding mansion in the Muyang Marquis mansion in the Dechu state. From then on there was no love or hate, only a standpoint. Yi Li nodded, "I will go and see Yi Ying later." Yaoji nodded, "I will try to arrange it. If Princess has nothing else, we will go back first." Yi Li thought for a while. After finding Big Brother, you and Mu Lai can go back to Glass City. Hearing this, Yaoji couldn't help but be startled. She had been in the Muyang Marquis mansion for more than 2 years, and had already become a very important nail of the Prince Ding mansion in Nanjing. Although it couldn't be said that she was irreplaceable, if she suddenly disappeared, it would not be easy to deal with. "Princess, this is..." Yi Li looked up at her and smiled faintly. "You have done what you should do. There is no need to stay in Jiangnan and waste your time." Yaoji was silent for a moment, then nodded. "Yaoji understands." "Thank you, Princess." Yaoji left with Mu Lai. Qin Feng frowned, looked at Yi Li with some worry. "Princess, is it not good to say this to her now?" Yi Li looked at him with a smile. "You don't believe her?" Qin Feng's face stiffened, and after a while he sighed, "Maybe." In fact, Qin Feng himself didn't quite understand what was going on between him and Yaoji. He had never forgotten the haggard and thin woman who came back, but he couldn't be sure what Yaoji thought of him. If Yaoji had feelings for him, why did she ask the prince and princess to leave Glass City and return to the Muyang Marquis mansion without hesitation? And if he really loved Yaoji, why couldn't trust her completely? But she was worried that Yaoji would betray her at the first moment when the princess tested her. Looking at Qin's face, he smiled. "Don't think too much. It's only natural that you're worried. There is no trust. Yaoji is Yaoji. Yaoji. It was not that Yi Li did not believe in Yaoji's loyalty, but a woman's life was the easiest to be swayed by 2 people. One was her lover and the other was her children. Even Yi Li couldn't guarantee that she wouldn't do something she shouldn't do for Mo Xiuyao and her 3 children. It was better to give Yaoji a buffer now than to ask her to accept it all of a sudden. Even if there was something wrong with Yaoji, they could make up for it at any time. As early as the moment Yi Li came to Nanjing, the end of the Muyang Marquis mansion had been destined. Emo Shuyao hated and detested many people. The former Marquis Muyang was undoubtedly one of them. Since he was already here, Yili didn't mind ending it for him first. What's more, once Emo Jingli agreed to ally with the Beirong of Xiling, the Muyang Marquis mansion would be the enemy of the Prince Ding mansion, so it was okay to get rid of them first. Qin Feng was silent for a long time, and then looked at Yili. Princess, please let me handle the affairs of the Muyang Marquis mansion. Yili was a little hesitant. Have you thought it through? I thought it would be more appropriate to let Xue Jing and Lin Han handle it. Qin Feng smiled. Thank you, Princess. I won't let you down. Yili sighed softly. You should know. If the Muyang Marquis mansion was destroyed by Qin Feng, Yaoji and him would be in danger in the future. Even if Yaoji didn't love Muyang, he was still the father of her son. I understand. Qin Feng smiled faintly, but his tone was as firm as a rock. In that case, let Lin Han go with you. If there's anything inconvenient, let Lin Han do it. Yili said. Lin Han nodded. Yes, Princess. Of course, Lin Han understood what Princess meant. If Qin Feng needed to kill someone in the Muyang Marquis mansion, Lin Han could do it for him. Thank you, Princess. In the Muyang Marquis mansion, Yaoji took Mu Lai to her courtyard with a calm expression. But the way was suddenly blocked by someone in front of her. Yaoji looked up at the several women standing in front of her, and her face darkened slightly. The former young madam, now Marquis Muyang's wife, looked at the woman in front of her who was still enchanting even though she was over 30 years old. Her eyes were full of jealousy and unwillingness. She shrieked, Where did you go, Vice Madam? Yaoji was in a bad mood. She raised her eyebrows and said lightly, What's your business? Marquis Muyang's face stiffened. Her delicate face suddenly became a little ferocious. She gritted her teeth and said, Yaoji, you're too arrogant. Don't forget I'm Marquis Muyang's wife. Yaoji glanced at her and said indifferently, So what? You can keep the position of Marquis Muyang's wife. No one will take it from you. If you want, you can even keep the position of Vice Madam. You? Marquis Muyang's wife gnashed her teeth. She couldn't wait to tear the woman in front of her apart. She was a noble lady. How could she lose to a woman from the musical house? Over the years she was not only neglected by Muyang, but also laughed at by the noblewomen outside. At this time, Marquis Muyang's wife realized how much Yaoji had suffered because of her. She even almost lost her life. If she hadn't forced Yaoji, Yaoji would have hidden her identity for the rest of her life with her child. How could she become a spy of the Prince Ding mansion and come back to compete with her for favor? Yaoji glanced impatiently at the several charming women behind her. These women were specially chosen by Marquis Muyang's wife for Muyang in the past 2 years to show her virtuousness. Some were also sent by officials. But because of Yaoji's favor, these women could only put away their ambitions and stand behind Marquis Muyang to deal with Yaoji together. Unfortunately for Yaoji, who had experienced countless things, these people were too inexperienced. Even if they joined forces, they still couldn't take advantage of her. Yaoji was in a bad mood now. Naturally, she didn't have time to argue with these women. Looking up at Marquis Muyang's wife, she smiled and said in a low voice, Madam, there's something I've wanted to tell you for a long time. What do you want to say? Marquis Muyang stared at Yaoji warily. Yaoji smiled coldly. I've always wanted to tell you. In fact, it's useless for you to keep targeting me. Muyang isn't interested in you. Shouldn't you reflect on yourself? As a woman, your husband is so bored that he doesn't even want to look at you. I really feel sorry for you. Chapter 883. With that, Yaoji ignored Marquis Muyang, who instantly turned pale. She waved her sleeves and turned to go back to her courtyard. Are you in a bad mood? Mu Lai followed behind her. Although he seemed to be walking slowly, he kept a distance of 2 or 3 steps from Yaoji, who was walking quickly. Back in Yaoji's courtyard, Mu Lai asked faintly. Yaoji was startled and shook her head. Nothing. Mu Lai leaned against the pillar and looked at her quietly. We'll be able to return to Glass City soon. You'll be able to see your son. Aren't you happy? After spending a few years together, Mu Lai had developed some feelings for Yaoji. He was an orphan and didn't know his biological mother was Mu Yang. But every time he saw Yaoji miss her son, he still didn't want Yaoji to regret her mistake for the rest of her life. Yaoji smiled helplessly. Mu Yang was her son's father. Whether she still loved him or not, this was an unchangeable fact. How could she be happy? Mu Lai looked at her and said, if you can't accept it, you can tell Princess Consort to leave first. Princess Consort won't make things difficult for you. I can do it alone. Both Yaoji and Mu Lai were smart people. When Yili asked them to go back to Glass City together, Yaoji knew that Princess Consort planned to make a move on Marquis Muyang's residence. In fact, there were many people who could be sent to the Chu capital. Yaoji naturally wasn't a necessary candidate. The reason why Yaoji was chosen was undoubtedly because of Prince Ding's enmity towards Marquis Muyang's residence. Yaoji naturally knew that Marquis Muyang led troops to besiege Yili. As a result, Yili was forced to fall off a cliff by Genom of Gojoseon. Yaoji pulled out a faint smile and looked at Mu Lai. Thank you, I'm fine. Mu Lai frowned. A trace of worry was written on his young face. Yaoji raised her hand and rubbed his little head. You're just a child. Why are you thinking so much? Mu Lai slapped her hand away unhappily. I'm not a child anymore. Forget it, you can do whatever you want. Don't forget that your son is still waiting for you in Glass City. I'm going back to Glass City to go to Qilin. If you cause me to be unable to go back, I'll kill you. Yaoji couldn't help but smile as she watched Mu Lai turn around and leave. When they reached the door, Mu Lai stopped for a moment. He turned back and said, I can see that Governor Qin treats you quite well. Why don't you consider it? At the very least, Governor Qin is much better than that Mu Yang. At the very least, after you left for a few years, Governor Qin didn't fool around with other women. Look at your previous eyesight. Even I feel embarrassed to despise you. After saying that, he waved his hand and swaggered out without caring about Yaoji's change of expression. Sighing faintly, Yaoji reached out her hand and opened the jewelry box in front of the dressing table. She dug out an inconspicuous box hidden in the lowest corner of the room. Opening the box, there was a jasper lotus hairpin inside. She didn't know why she kept this hairpin with her. When she left Glass City for Chu capital, she had already made the decision to never touch anyone again. Qin Feng was her savior and was Princess Ding's confidant. He was in charge of the most elite Qilin in the Prince Ding mansion. In fact, even Princess Ding's third brother, the third son of the Su family, was his subordinate. Such a person, even if he wasn't famous, he wasn't someone she who was born in a musical house and had a child could match up to. If she had a choice, Yaoji would rather have met a man like Qin Feng than Mu Yang. Perhaps all the good men in the world were in the Prince Ding mansion. Or perhaps it was because Prince Ding's deep affection for the princess followed suit. Most of the men in the Prince Ding mansion seemed to be devoted. Even if Mu Yang doted on her so much that everyone in Nanjing knew, the number of concubines in the Marquis Muyang's mansion was no less than any other family. Mu Yang was a charming and romantic dream in her best years. When she woke up from the dream, there was only a faint sadness left. But Qin Feng was the beauty she hoped for but didn't dare to touch. While she was lost in thought, a soft sound behind her made Yaoji come back to her senses. She was used to being vigilant in the past few years. When she suddenly turned around and saw the man standing behind her, she couldn't help but be startled. Compared with Mu Yang's fame in Chu capital, Qin Feng's appearance was also handsome but not ostentatious. The commander of Qilin, who was born in the army, had a completely different temperament from the son of a noble family. Mu Yang was like a shining sword, Qin Feng was the famous sword hidden in the scabbard. It seemed inconspicuous, but the light when it was unsheathed could shine in all directions. Why are you here? After a while Yaoji asked. Qin Feng's eyes fell on the jasper hairpin in her hand. His eyes couldn't help but be a little warmer. Naturally, Yaoji also noticed his gaze. She hurriedly put the jade hairpin back into the box. You're here now. Does the princess consort have something to tell me? Feeling a little embarrassed by his gaze, Yaoji quickly changed the topic. Qin Feng's eyes flashed with an almost invisible smile. He nodded and looked at Yaoji calmly. Yes. The matter of the Marquis Muyang's mansion. The princess left it to me. Hearing this, Yaoji's hands that were busy cleaning up the table paused. Her face instantly turned pale. Chapter 884. Looking at Yaoji's face, which is as pale as paper, Qin Feng slightly restrained his gaze. He calmly looked at her and asked, Do you have any problem? Yaoji was startled. She forced a smile and said, What problem can I have? Qin Feng said calmly, I heard what you said to Mu Lai just now. Mu Lai is right. If you feel uncomfortable, I will report to the princess and let you leave first. Yaoji quickly shook her head. No need, I'm fine. Qin Feng looked at her seriously. You'd better think carefully. If you can't bear it and ruin the prince and the princess's relationship. Meeting Qin Feng's calm eyes, Yaoji's heart trembled. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them again she was calm. She nodded. I know. My son is still in Glass City. I won't do anything to hurt him. That had better be the case. Qin Feng looked at Yaoji deeply and turned to leave. He quickly disappeared from Marquis Muyang's mansion. Not far from Marquis Muyang's mansion, he saw Lin Han dangling from the eaves like a bat and looking at him. Seeing Qin Feng coming over, Lin Han slid down from the eaves. He looked at Qin Feng and shook his head. Why do you have to do this? You'll only make her hate you if you do this. He specially came to Marquis Muyang's mansion. He thought Qin Feng was going to tell Yaoji his feelings or something. Who knew that it was a series of threats and warnings? Did Qin Feng really like Yaoji? Lin Han was a little confused. Qin Feng said calmly, the princess is right. It's better to make it clear now than to lose your life in the future. In the end, you still don't believe her? Lin Han raised his eyebrows and asked. Qin Feng tilted his head and thought, what should I believe? That Yaoji doesn't have the intention to betray Prince Ding Mansion? Now I believe that Yaoji won't betray Prince Ding Mansion. But I don't know if Yaoji still loves Mu Yang. As long as Yaoji still had the slightest feelings for Mu Yang, no one could guarantee what Yaoji would do at that time. Now we just need to ensure that the princess's plan and safety are not messed up. Seeing Qin Feng walk forward without any hesitation, Lin Han shrugged and followed him, asking, should we send someone to watch her? Mu Lai will keep an eye on her. Qin Feng's voice was heard faintly. Lin Han, who was behind them, sighed. Relationships were really too troublesome. Fortunately, he didn't have any trouble in this regard at the moment. Otherwise he would die of pain like Qin Feng Yaoji or young Master Feng San. It would be better to wait for a few more years before finding a suitable girl to marry. In Marquis Muyang's mansion, Yaoji was alone in her room, lost in thought. Today's matter had given her a great shock. Other than the initial panic, Yaoji gradually understood the meaning of Ding Wangfei. At the same time, she couldn't help but admire Princess Ding for being able to think of such trivial things. She never thought of betraying Prince Ding Mansion, just like she never thought of getting back together with Mu Yang. But at the same time, she never thought that one day she would want Mu Yang to die. Perhaps the princess didn't want Mu Yang to die. But for someone like Mu Yang, there was no difference between destroying Marquis Muyang's mansion and killing him. Princess Ding was very thoughtful, so Yaoji didn't blame her for probing. He even thanked her. If she waited until the last moment to know these things, she really wasn't sure if she could do it. Although it was also difficult and painful now, it gave her enough time to think and make a decision. Although it was painful, it also reduced the possibility of accidents. Yaoji, I heard that you're not feeling well? Mu Yang's voice came from outside the door. Yaoji quickly restrained her expression and turned to look at the man at the door with a calm expression. He was already over 30 years old, but he had more of a mature man's steady aura compared to when he was young. He was no longer the handsome and gentle young master of the capital, nor the helpless Marquis Shitzi who had to compromise in pain between his lover and his parents. Now he was more powerful and domineering. Yaoji stood up and said with a faint smile, nothing, I'm just not in a good mood. Mu Yang looked at her with heartache and an apologetic expression. Did Madam find trouble with you again? I'll tell her later so she won't bother you anymore. Yaoji smiled slightly and her lips curved into a mocking smile. She said indifferently, it's been so many years, what's the use of telling her? Yaoji. Mu Yang sighed helplessly and said, are you still angry with me? Lai is already so old, can't we just live peacefully? I'll give you whatever you want and no one will bully you and your son anymore. Yaoji's smile was a little bitter. After so many years she was a little numb to such words. Although she returned to the Marquis Muyang's mansion with ulterior motives, she gradually had to rejoice in this ulterior motive. If she was not saved by Qin Feng and directly taken back to the Marquis Muyang's mansion, if the son left in the mansion was not Mu Lai who was trained by the Prince Ding mansion since childhood, but her own son with Mu Yang's attitude, would she and her son be able to live until now? Mu Yang loved her very much, but he also loved other things. Even if it was for her and their child, he would not be willing to give up anything, not even a little bit. Even if she was no longer in a position to blame him, she still could not help but feel sad for his attitude for her child. Do you still remember the serious illness that Liar had in the autumn 2 years ago? Yaoji asked faintly. Mu Yang frowned slightly. Yaoji, what's wrong with you? Yaoji ignored him and continued, and last year he fell off the back of a horse. And this spring he fell into the lake. Yaoji recounted the various dangers that Mu Lai had encountered in the past few years intermittently. Of course, there were also some things that she had done both openly and secretly. Although Mu Lai wasn't really her son, all that he had suffered was for her child's sake. And what made Yaoji even more disheartened was that Mu Yang had never punished anyone behind the scenes except for killing those servants. Yaoji, what's wrong with you? Isn't Liger all right? Why are you talking about this again today? You know, it's us who are sorry. Before he could finish, Yaoji looked at him coldly and said, It's not us, it's you. Mu Yang, it's you who are sorry to those women. If I left the Marquis Mu Yang's mansion and never came back, you wouldn't have to be sorry to anyone. It's you who insisted on quarreling with your parents and taking your anger out on your wife. After a long time you feel that you are sorry to them. But, even if I am sorry to them, my son is not sorry to them. Yaoji. Mu Yang looked at the cold-faced woman in front of him with some surprise. Since he took Yaoji and Mu Lai back to the Marquis's mansion a few years ago, Yaoji's temperament was different from before. He had always thought that Yaoji still blamed him for making her and the child suffer so much, so he had been taking care of her and accommodating her in every way. But it was not until now that he realized that Yaoji was no longer the Yaoji with bright eyes, sweet smiles, and charming enchanting Yaoji in Qingcheng Lane. On her originally beautiful face, there was a coldness and decisiveness that was completely unfamiliar to him. Mu Yang suddenly felt a trace of panic. Could it be that he had never really known Yaoji in the past few years? Chapter 885. Yaoji looked at him indifferently. After a long while, she sighed faintly and said, Just now, concubine Lu sent a message saying that she seems to be pregnant. You should go and have a look. Mu Yang's expression softened as if he had understood something. Smiling, he hugged Yaoji's thin shoulders and said somewhat awkwardly and complacently, It's my fault. I shouldn't have kept it from you. But you know concubine Lu's father. Yaoji lowered her eyes and said lightly, I know, there are only 2 other girls in the residence besides Lai. It's a good thing that concubine Lu has a child. He looked at Yaoji to make sure that her expression was normal and she wasn't angry. Only then did he release her and say, Then I'll go and have a look first. I'll come over tonight to have dinner with you. Yaoji nodded her head dispiritedly and left. Just as Mu Yang went out, the window beside him moved and Mu Lai climbed in through the window. Looking at Yaoji, she shook her head and said, I don't understand why you keep thinking about him. For no reason you've been given the title of a special favorite. How are the women in this mansion any less than other families? If it weren't for our protection you wouldn't even know how you died. Yaoji looked at him helplessly and said, Why don't you open the door? Are you addicted to climbing through the window? You're just a kid, what do you know? There's nothing going on between me and him. It's just that he... Mu Lai rolled his eyes and climbed into a chair to sit down. He said, This young master doesn't like to take the ordinary path. I know what you're thinking. Even if you don't have any feelings for him, he's still the father of my younger brother whom I've never met. If the child grows up and finds out that it was you, his mother, who caused his father's death, you won't be able to explain it to the child, right? Can't you just not tell him? There's no such thing as an impenetrable wall in the world, unless he doesn't know about his background for the rest of his life, Yaoji said with some melancholy. Mu Lai said, I've never seen my parents but they're still living happily. Also, didn't you say that his adoptive parents treated him very well? Yaoji silently glanced at Mu Lai. How could a child who had never been a parent understand the feelings of a mother, no matter how smart he was? Mu Lai waved his hand and said, That's enough. At most, you and Commander Qin can have another child. As for my little brother, I just need to know that he's doing well. It was much better than letting him know his current identity, right? Didn't you say that he is the son of an official now? He was well aware of how awkward Mu Lai's identity had been for the past few years. Firstly, he was the eldest son and the only son of Marquis Muyang's household. If everything went well, he might inherit the title of Marquis Muyang's mansion in the future. But on the other hand, he was the son of a concubine. His birth mother was once a dancer. Moreover, he was an unmarried child. If it wasn't for the fact that the house of Marquis Muyang never had a male heir, he wouldn't even be listed in the genealogy. This caused him to be ostracized by those of the same age as him. Fortunately, he didn't have to stay here and pretend to be the young master of Marquis Muyang's mansion. Otherwise, after a few more years, even his marriage would be awkward. A real big family would not be willing to marry their first wife's daughter to the son of a dancer. A small family or a concubine's daughter would not be worthy of the identity of the heir of Marquis Muyang's household. If Yaoji's youngest son really grew up in Marquis Muyang's mansion, Mu Lai dared to guarantee that he would not be killed by others. If he was not spoiled by Muyang, he would probably have a twisted personality. What nonsense are you talking about? Yaoji glared at him angrily. This child was getting more and more outspoken as he grew up. Mu Lai said with a smile, "Don't be embarrassed. Commander Qin came to see you just now, right?" Yaoji glanced at him indifferently. When Qin Feng was mentioned, Yaoji's expression became even more gloomy. Mu Lai patted her sympathetically and said, "Actually, you were asking for trouble when you came to Marquis Muyang's mansion. If you married Commander Qin directly, even if our prince hates the Mu family, he would not find trouble with his brother for the sake of Princess Consort and Commander Qin." Yaoji smiled bitterly. How could things be as simple as he thought? If it were Princess Ding, she might not care, but Prince Ding would never let the Mu family off so easily. If Prince Ding wanted to kill Marquis Muyang, he could have done it long ago. The reason why he did not do it was because he wanted to torture Marquis Muyang and destroy the Mu family. How could Prince Ding let go of such a pawn like her? In these few years, although Marquis Muyang's mansion was not destroyed, it was not peaceful. "Lighter, you don't have to worry about me. I know what to do." Yaoji smiled faintly. In this world, no one was more important than her son. Even if she could not be by his side to watch him grow up, she must do her best to let him live a worry-free life. In Prince Li's mansion, Ying walked out of the mansion with two people beside her. But as soon as she walked into the hall, she was stopped. Ying frowned and looked at Dongfang Yu in front of her. She said unhappily, "What are you doing?" Dongfang Yu stared at Ying from head to toe and asked, "Where are you going?" Ying's pretty face darkened. She said unhappily, "What does where I go have to do with you?" Dongfang Yu said indifferently, "Now I have the final say in Prince Li's mansion. No one can go out without my permission." Ying sneered, "Who do you think you are? You are the princess consort and I am also the princess consort. If I want to go out, what can you do?" "I have asked the imperial consort dowager. The imperial consort dowager has agreed. What right do you have to disagree?" These days, the direction of Prince Li's mansion had obviously changed. Dongfang Yu, who did not care about anything, suddenly took over many affairs of Prince Li's mansion. She even had the intention of making Consort Xian Zhao a mere figurehead. Consort Xian Zhao did not like Ying. But compared to the overbearing Dongfang Yu, the obedient and harmless Ying was especially cute. So when Ying occasionally asked her for something, Consort Xian Zhao would mostly agree. Dongfang Yu sneered disdainfully. "I said, I have the final say in Prince Li's mansion. Not to mention Consort Xian Zhao, even if the Empress Dowager came personally, it would be useless." It was no wonder that Consort Xian Zhao did not like Dongfang Yu. Compared to Ying, Dongfang Yu was much better than Ying except for her bad reputation. But at the same time, Dongfang Yu's temper was not comparable to Ying's. Maybe she had no interest in Mo Jingli, or maybe she did not care about Mo Jingli at all. When Dongfang Yu talked about Consort Xian Zhao and the Empress Dowager, there was no respect at all. Consort Xian Zhao had been noble all her life. How could she tolerate the rudeness of the younger generation? "I insist on going out. What can you do?" Ying said harshly. Dongfang Yu raised her eyebrows. She did not expect Ying, who seemed to have no temper these days, to be so tough. Compared to her third sister, Princess Ding Yili, this Ying was not like a family at all. Dongfang Yu had never cared about her either. Now that she was contradicted by Ying, she was naturally even more unhappy. "Ying, for Princess Ding's sake, I will also give you some face. But you'd better not be shameless." Ying was furious. She did not care about Dongfang Yu and turned to walk out of the door. She did not believe that Dongfang Yu would dare to kill her in Prince Li's mansion. "Catch her," Dongfang Yu said coldly. Chapter 886. A figure in green flashed past and two men appeared in front of Ying, blocking her way. Dongfang Yu said proudly, take this woman back to her courtyard. If she still dares to cause trouble, throw her into the dungeon. Yes. The two men replied respectfully. How dare you? Ying was shocked. These two men were obviously not guards of the Li Palace. Seeing the two men coming forward to grab her, Ying screamed, Dongfang Yu, you're too much. Your prince will not let you off. Dongfang Yu snorted disdainfully, stay at home obediently. If you dare to go out, I'll break your legs. Do you think this is Li City and you still have that Ding Wang Fei Jieji backing you up? How dare you? Prince, save me. Ying struggled and screamed. What's going on? Mo Jingli came in from outside, looking at the farce in front of him with an unfriendly expression. Seeing Mo Jingli come in, Ying quickly broke free from the people holding her and hid behind Mo Jingli. Prince, save me. Dongfang Yu wants to break my legs. Mo Jingli looked at Dongfang Yu unhappily and frowned. What are you doing now? Don't go overboard. Dongfang Yu frowned as well. How am I going overboard? I just asked someone to send her back to her room. What happened in the Li Palace these days could not be hidden from Mo Jingli. Mo Jingli looked at Ying and asked, what's going on? Ying didn't expect that Mo Jingli would ask her. She hurriedly seized the opportunity and said, I told the old concubine that I wanted to go out for a walk. Who knows why she went crazy and stopped me in the hall. She even threatened to throw me into the dungeon and break my legs if I went out again. Prince, how come I didn't know? I, the Li princess consort, can't even go out? If Prince is really tired of Ing, or why don't you just divorce me? Why don't you just divorce me? Why do I have to suffer today's humiliation? After such a long time, Ying finally made some progress. He was very proficient in using the tactic of retreating in order to advance. Although Mo Jingli no longer liked Ying like he used to, she was still a woman who had been with him for more than 10 years. Since he had made a promise to Yi Li, he naturally wouldn't mistreat her. She glanced at Dongfang Yu unhappily and said, what does Inger want to go out for a walk have to do with you? Imperial Mother has already agreed, so why are you making a fuss? Dongfang Yu's face darkened as he said, I don't care. In short, the people of the Li Palace are not allowed to go out without my orders. Mo Jingli's face darkened when he heard that. He said coldly, Dongfang Yu, don't go overboard. Do I need your permission to go wherever I want to go? I haven't settled the score with you for going against Imperial Mother these few days. Don't fail to appreciate my kindness. Dongfang Yu smiled coldly and said, that's your Imperial Mother. What does it have to do with me? I don't need to give in to that old woman. Mo Jingli was about to fly into a rage, but he thought of something and finally restrained himself. He glared at Dongfang Yu and said, you must have a reason for not letting Inger go out, right? Dongfang Yu choked and said unyieldingly, I'm happy. If I don't say she's not allowed to go out, then she's not allowed to go out. Crazy woman. Mo Jingli couldn't be bothered with her. He pulled Ying up and walked towards the door. He called for his guards and said, send the princess out. I'll see who dares to stop you. No matter how powerful Dongfang Yu was, Mo Jingli was the real master of the regent's residence. In the end, Yi Ying was personally escorted out of the Li Palace by Mo Jingli's guards. In the hall, Mo Jingli unhappily told Dongfang Yu to take care of herself and returned to the study without looking back. Dongfang Yu stared gloomily at the empty door and didn't speak for a long time. However, it made the people around her secretly feel a little apprehensive. The people by Dongfang Yu's side now were all former subordinates of Infinite Boundless Mountain. After Infinite Boundless Mountain was destroyed, they naturally followed their young master, Dongfang Yu. Many of them had grown up together with Dongfang Yu in Infinite Boundless Mountain. However, looking at Dongfang Yu's current appearance, they almost couldn't believe that this was the intelligent yet somewhat naive young master of Infinite Boundless Mountain. In the end, they could only assume that the sudden rejection of Infinite Boundless Mountain and the sudden death of Madame had dealt a huge blow to Dongfang Yu, causing her personality to change completely. They could only sigh inwardly. Princess, that concubine Rong has already left. Should we? The green-clothed man who had just entered to capture Yi Ying asked in a low voice. Dongfang Yu snorted softly and said, forget it. If we go overboard, it would instead arouse Mo Jingli's suspicions. Send people to keep an eye on Yi Ying. If she dares to come into contact with the people of the Prince Ding mansion, kill her. The green-clothed man said doubtfully, as everyone knows, the relationship between Princess Ding and concubine Rong is not good. Even if the people of the Prince Ding mansion really come to look for young Master Qingchen, I'm afraid they won't look for concubine Rong. Moreover, even Prince Li doesn't know. What can she know? Dongfang Yu was silent for a moment and said, "That's true. However, it's always good to be careful. The people of the Prince Ding mansion have always been crafty. Ying, that stupid woman, might even help others count the money after being sold." The green-clothed man nodded and said, "I understand. I will send people to follow up with concubine Rong." After Yi Ying left the princely mansion, she let Mo Jingli's guards go back. Originally, these guards only wanted to send her out of the mansion so that Dongfang Yu wouldn't make things difficult for her. Naturally, they wouldn't follow her everywhere. Yi Ying casually walked around Nanjing City and then turned to go to a temple in the city that was quite popular with incense. Every month, Yi Ying would come to the temple to pray for her long-lost child. Seeing her arrival, the abbot of the temple hurriedly came out to greet her and invited her into the temple. Yi Ying lit incense as usual and then dismissed the young novice monks who served in the temple. She knelt alone in the temple to pray for her child. In the past 2 years, Yi Ying often came here. The young novice monks in the temple all knew that concubine Li was praying for her son. Although they didn't understand why concubine Li prayed for the living every time when her son was clearly dead, these people also knew what to say and what not to say. Therefore, they didn't care about Yi Ying's behavior. In the quiet temple, Yi Ying knelt on the futon and piously prayed silently in her heart to the Buddha statue above, until the sound of light footsteps behind her startled her. She turned around and saw a young man in white coming out from the back of the hall. She saw that the young man in white was incomparably handsome. There was a smile on his face that made people not feel disgusted at all. They only felt as if they were bathed in the spring breeze and their hearts were comforted. Yi Ying had seen many handsome men, but she had never seen a man like the one in front of her. It was easy to have a good impression of him. Even young Master Qingchen, who was like a celestial being turned into a human, had a more unapproachable feeling compared to him. "Fourth sister, how are you?" the young man in white asked with a smile. Yi Ying was stunned and said with some surprise, Third sister? How did you know?" Looking at that handsome face seriously, wasn't it 40 to 50% similar to Yi Li's appearance? It was just that compared to Yi Li's original gentle and graceful manner, he had more of the elegance of a scholarly family. Chapter 887. Yi Li played with the fan in her hand and smiled, "Isn't it me? Can't you recognize me, fourth sister?" Yi Ying smiled shamefully. Yi Li's appearance was too different from what she remembered. If they were on the street, she might not be able to recognize her even if they met face to face. After that, Yi Ying asked, "Why did third sister come to Nanjing personally?" She thought it was Yaoji who wanted to see her. She did not expect Yi Li to come personally. Hearing Yi Ying's words, the smile on Yi Li's face faded. She sighed softly and said, "Of course something happened. A few days ago you asked Yaoji to send a secret letter back to Glass City. What did it say?" Yi Ying was stunned. "What's the problem?" Yi Li shook her head and said, "It's not your problem. That letter was sent to Big Brother, but now, Big Brother is missing. So I want to know what was written in the letter." Yi Ying was relieved and hurriedly said, "After Dongfang Hui died, Mo Jingli went to Dongfang Yu. Now all the remaining forces of the Boundless Mountain are in the hands of Dongfang Yu. Mo Jingli made a deal with Dongfang Yu. Dongfang Yu will help Mo Jingli with all her strength and Mo Jingli will help Dongfang Yu get young Master Qingchen." "Get?" Yi Li frowned. This word made people feel uncomfortable when it was used on Su Qingchen. After thinking for a while, she asked, "Then, is it possible that Mo Jingli kidnapped Big Brother?" Yi Ying thought for a while and finally shook her head. "It shouldn't be. Mo Jingli did send people to cross the river, but they came back empty-handed. Mo Jingli was very angry and quarreled with Dongfang Yu. These days, although Dongfang Yu helped Mo Jingli suppress the Empress Dowager, Dongfang Yu was also very arrogant in the residence. She did not even care about the virtuous concubine. Mo Jingli quarreled with her several times because of this, and she did not allow me to go out today." Yi Li frowned and thought for a long time before asking, "What about Dongfang Yu? Did Dongfang Yu leave the manor these days?" Yi Ying shook her head. After a while she came back to her senses. She looked at Yi Li in surprise and said, "You think that Dongfang Yu kidnapped young Master Qingchen?" Yi Li sighed and said, "It's just a guess." Ying said, these days Dongfang Yu did not leave the house. However, she had a lot of subordinates and there were also quite a few people from Infinite Boundless Mountain in the King's Manor these days. Mo Jingli didn't say anything and no one can do anything about it. Hearing Yi Li's words, Ying couldn't help but be shocked by Dongfang Yu's audacity. Ying admitted that she could never kidnap a man whom she liked but did not like her back. Yi Li played with her fan as she pondered. After a while he said, after you go back, find a way to let Mo Jingli know that it was Dongfang Yu who kidnapped young Master Qingchen. Ying was startled and said somewhat blankly, how am I going to tell Mo Jingli? How will he believe me? It had to be said that after these days, Ying was actually somewhat afraid of Dongfang Yu. Especially after Dongfang Hui's death, every time she saw Dongfang Yu she always gave her a gloomy and terrifying feeling. However, she also understood that she had to do as Yi Li said. Not to mention that she still needed Yi Li's help to find her child. If Yi Li didn't send people to protect her secretly, even if she wasn't killed by Dongfang Yu, she didn't know what kind of life she would have. Just look at how the arrogant Princess Xixia had been suppressed by Dongfang Yu these days. Yi Li thought for a while. It was indeed inappropriate for Yi Ying to say it. Not to mention how she would find out about young Master Qingchen's disappearance. Even Yi Ying's brain wouldn't be able to think of such a complicated matter. The moment she said it, the first person Mo Jingli would suspect would be Yi Ying. After thinking for a while, Yi Li said, how is Princess Xixia now? Yi Ying snorted with some schadenfreude. Her life is naturally more difficult than mine. Thinking of how Princess Xixia had suppressed her for so many years without any title or status, and then looking at how Princess Xixia was being punished by Dongfang Yu, Ying couldn't help but feel happy from the bottom of her heart. Yi Li's expression was indifferent, but Mo Jingli still dotes on her more, right? No matter how she felt about Princess Xixia, at least compared to Yi Ying, Princess Xixia was better at pleasing men. Looking at Yi Ying's gloating and jealous expression, she knew that Princess Xixia had not completely fallen out of favor. And with Dongfang Yu around, even if Princess Xixia completely fell out of favor, she wouldn't care. Dongfang Yu might be very powerful, but she was too easy to be hated by men like Mo Jingli. Yi Li was sure that if Dongfang Yu punished Princess Xixia, Mo Jingli would dote on her more. You can find a way to let Princess Xixia know about this. When the time comes, she will definitely be happy to analyze it for Mo Jingli. But be careful, don't let her suspect you. Yi Li instructed. Ying thought for a moment. Because Dongfang Yu controlled the Li Palace, many of the people in the Prince Ding mansion could no longer be used. But Yi Li's instructions were not too difficult, so she nodded and agreed. Yi Li saw that she was looking at her hesitantly and thought for a moment before saying, right, there's news about your child. What? Yi Ying's heart trembled and she looked at Yi Li in shock. Tears of excitement flashed in her eyes and she didn't care about how they were dressed. She grabbed Yi Li's hand saying, there's news? Really, he's really still alive? Yi Li nodded calmly. Looking at Yi Ying's agitated state, a trace of pity flashed across her heart. She said softly, there's news. Mo Jingqi didn't kill that child. We'll have more accurate news in a few days. Yi Ying couldn't care less. She nodded repeatedly saying, I know, I'll wait. Third sister, thank you. I'll do whatever you want me to do as long as I can see my child. Yi Li sighed softly saying, I won't ask you to do anything dangerous. Don't worry, after we find Big Brother, I'll take you to see that child. The tears in Yi Ying's eyes finally fell and she collapsed on the futon, sobbing. Originally, when the child was still alive, although she treated him well, she didn't have any feelings of longing for him. She would even use the child to fight for favor. But when she found out that the child wasn't hers and that her own son was missing, and that she hadn't even seen him, Ying felt like her heart was being cut by a knife. She only felt that as long as she could find her child, she would do anything, even if it cost her her life. Yi Li reached out to pat her on the back saying, all right, wipe your tears and go back. There are still people watching outside. It's not good to stay for too long. Ying finally stopped crying. She wiped her face and got up to leave. Yi Li sat in the empty temple hall and raised her head to look at the Buddha statue that was looking at all living beings with a merciful expression. She could not help but smile bitterly. Princess Consort. Zhuo Jing silently appeared in the temple hall, reporting in a low voice, there are people following Princess Consort Li outside. They're from the Infinite Boundless Mountain. Yi Li nodded saying, we'll leave later. Don't worry about them. Chapter 888. Zhuejing nodded silently. After a while Zhuejing asked, Princess wants Mo Jingli and Dongfang Yu to fight each other. Will that work? Yili sighed, we have to try whether it works or not. We all think that Dongfang Yu caught Big Brother. But we can't find her if she doesn't move. In that case, it's better to alert her. Mo Jingli is more familiar with Nanjing than we are. If Dongfang Yu really caught Big Brother, I don't believe that she can hide Big Brother too far away from her. Even if it's not in Nanjing, it should be nearby. Zhuejing nodded in agreement. This was the only way now. Jiangnan was neither big nor small, and the infinite boundless mountain had been operating for hundreds of years. No one knew where Dongfang Yu would hide young Master Qingchen. Send someone to keep an eye on the Li Palace. Dongfang Yu won't return and won't see Big Brother. Yili ordered in a low voice. Yes. Zhuejing whispered. Prince Regent's Palace. Dongfang Yu sat alone in the study, staring at the portrait spread out on the desk, lost in thought. Her soft eyes were full of infatuation and resentment. It had to be said that Dongfang Yu's painting skills were very good. The man in the portrait had white clothes and black hair. His expression was indifferent, like an immortal from the 9 heavens. Lifting her hand to touch the handsome face of the man in the portrait, Dongfang Yu's eyes flashed with a happy smile. Bang! The door of the study was kicked open from the outside. Dongfang Yu's eyes were cold. She looked up unhappily at the angry man standing at the door. What are you doing? Mo Jingli walked quickly into the study. Seeing the portrait on the desk, he snorted disdainfully. He stepped forward and grabbed Dongfang Yu's clothes. Bitch! How dare you play I? Dongfang Yu was startled. She unhappily waved his hand away. I don't know what you're doing. Mo Jingli, don't think that I'm afraid of you. Believe it or not, I'll kill you now. Mo Jingli smiled contemptuously. Kill me? Now that the world is so big, with the exception of I, how can there still be a place for your infinite boundless mountain in Jiangnan? Do you think you can walk out of the Li Palace alive after killing I? What's more, now that you have a handsome man in your hands, are you willing to die? Dongfang Yu's expression changed slightly. I don't know what you're talking about. Mo Jingli sneered. You don't know? I sent people to help you catch Su Qingchen, but you still sent people to stop me halfway? This prince has taken the blame for you, but all the benefits have fallen to you alone? At that time you can just walk away and live a carefree life, leaving I to fight to the death with the Prince Ding mansion. That's a good idea. Dongfang Yu, if you had been so smart when you were in Glass City, how could you have ended up like this? Dongfang Yu's heart skipped a beat, but he said without changing his expression, I don't know where you heard this crazy talk from. What do you mean? You didn't have the ability to catch young Master Qingchen, so I didn't break my promise to you. Don't push your luck. Mo Jingli's expression was distorted and he grinned. Do you think I will still believe you? From today on you stay in the palace for I, and you're not allowed to go anywhere. You want to put me under house arrest? Dongfang Yu stared at him with a gloomy face. Mo Jingli raised his eyebrows and said, Tell me where Su Qingchen is now. He dared to catch Su Qingchen, not to let this woman be infatuated with him. Dongfang Yu was unmoved. I don't know what you're talking about. Mo Jingli didn't care. He pushed Dongfang Yu away, picked up the portrait on the table and laughed mockingly. You haven't left the palace these days, have you? What, you don't dare to see young Master Qingchen? That's right. Young Master Qingchen is a handsome man, known as the immortal young master. How could he like a withered woman like you? You only dare to hold the portrait and be infatuated with it. Dongfang Yu's expression changed slightly, and she reached out to grab the portrait in Mo Jingli's hand. Mo Jingli, give it back to me. Mo Jingli moved sideways to push her away. Knowing that he was no match for Dongfang Yu, Mo Jingli didn't want to tangle with her. He turned to walk out and warned, I advise you to stay in the Li Palace obediently and don't act rashly. Do you think young Master Qingchen knows that you caught him? You don't dare to see him, do you? Young Master Qingchen is the wisest in the world. How could he not guess? Do you think Su Qingchen would rather die than have a woman like you? If I were young Master Qingchen, I would rather die than have a woman like you. You've tarnished the reputation of the Su family for hundreds of years. Mo Jingli. Dongfang Yu was furious. She grabbed the inkstone on the table and threw it at Mo Jingli's back. Mo Jingli was already prepared. In a flash he was already out of the room. The inkstone hit the door of the study with a clang. Staring at the door that was shaking because of her smash, Dong Fongyu's expression was so sinister and twisted that it made people feel cold. After a long time she gritted her teeth and spat out 2 words, "Shi Xia." Chapter 889. In the Li Palace where Princess Shi Xia lived, Princess Shi Xia was sitting happily on the chaise lounge dozing off. She had been suppressed by Dong Fengyu these days. Although she had King Li's protection, King Li could not accompany her all the time, let alone punish Dong Fengyu who held all the power in the boundless mountain. Therefore she had been very wrong these days. Today she finally had the chance to complain to Prince Li about her. Compared to Yi Ying who had long fallen out of favor, she had been favored all these years, although she did not have a real status. Mo Jingli did not hide many things from her, so Princess Shi Xia knew that Mo Jingli had sent people to intercept young Master Qing Chen. Although she did not think highly of Mo Jingli's mission this time, she knew how powerful Su Qingchen was. In the end, Mo Jingli's people returned empty-handed. It was not an important matter at first, but when she accidentally overheard the 2 girls talking yesterday, she suddenly had a thought and pushed this matter to Dong Fengyu. As for whether it was true or not, who cared? As long as it made sense, Mo Jingli would believe it. Just by looking at Prince Li's expression when he left her place, and then hurriedly rushed to the study. Early in the morning he went to Dong Fengyu's place and gave her a fierce scolding. She knew that Prince Li still believed her words. "Bitch, you're so relaxed." Dong Fengyu's voice suddenly sounded at the door. The coldness in her voice made Princess Shi Xia shiver. Princess Shi Xia stood up abruptly and glared at Dong Fengyu who brought people in. "What are you doing here?" Dong Fengyu stepped into the hall, walked in front of Princess Shi Xia and looked at her condescendingly. Slap. Just when Princess Shi Xia was getting impatient and was about to get angry, Dong Fengyu suddenly raised her hand and slapped Princess Shi Xia's face quickly and hatefully. In fact, when men hit women they would hold back most of the time. On the contrary, when women hit women, they would often use all their strength. Dong Fengyu was also a martial artist. With this slap, Princess Shi Xia's face was slapped to one side, and a few red and swollen fingerprints appeared on her white cheeks. A trace of blood flowed from the corner of her lips and slid down her chest. "You..." Princess Shi Xia was stunned by this sudden slap in the face. She did not expect Dong Fengyu to hit her without even saying a word. Princess Shi Xia held her burning cheek and her eyes were about to spit fire. "Dong Fengyu, how dare you hit me?" Dong Fengyu curled his lips in disdain. "So what if I hit you? Who do you think you are? You're just a concubine who doesn't even have a status. No, you can't even be considered a concubine. At most you're just a maidservant." Princess Shi Xia was originally a princess, Princess Shi Xia, but Dong Fengyu mocked you. But Dong Fengyu had so rudely mocked her. Princess Shi Xia was so angry that she laughed. She covered her face and gave Dong Fengyu the same disdainful smile. "So what if I have no status? At least Prince Li likes me. Unlike some people, he did not want me even when I offered myself to him, and now he wants to kidnap me. You can't be thinking about men so much that you want to rape young Master Qing Chen, right? So it was you who talked nonsense to Mo Jingli." Dong Fengyu gritted her teeth. Princess Shi Xia said proudly, "So what if I said it? If you dare to do it, don't be afraid of others talking about it. You really disgrace us women. If you are afraid that no one wants you, just put up with the dogs around you. Don't lick young Master Qing Chen's face. Maybe young Master Qing Chen can't stand a woman like you and would rather die." Dong Fengyu spoke without mercy, and Princess Shi Xia was not polite either. She also mercilessly poked at the other party's sore spot. Dong Fengyu's beautiful face withdrew a trace of a sinister smile, and she looked coldly at Princess Shi Xia. "Mo Jingli likes you. I will see how much Mo Jingli likes you. Come, drag her out and strip her naked. Dong Fengyu, don't you dare." Princess Shi Xia's face suddenly changed and she stared fiercely at Dong Fengyu. The people following Dong Fengyu were also shocked and looked at her hesitantly. Although they were all Dong Fengyu's people, Prince Li was the master of the regent's residence, and Princess Shi Xia was Mo Jingli's woman. "See if I dare or not. Go quickly." Princess Shi Xia sneered. "Invite Prince Li over and say that I have something to discuss with him." The subordinate had no choice but to follow the order to invite Mo Jingli. The other 2 people, one on the left and one on the right, pulled Princess Shi Xia to the courtyard and began to pull off her clothes. Princess Shi Xia was not a weak woman, and with a wave of the long whip in her hand she began to fight with them. But her martial arts were not enough to protect herself, and she was restrained after a few rounds. Dongfang Yu had already come out and looked coldly at Princess Xixia, who could not move, and sneered. "What are you waiting for? Pull off her clothes and whip her hard for me." Very quickly, Princess Xixia was only left with a thin inner garment. The weather in the south in September and October was not warm, and Princess Xixia, who was wearing a thin inner garment, shivered from the sudden cold. However, this couldn't be compared to the pain of the whip that pierced through the air and struck his body. After the first whip, Princess Xixia could not help but scream and fell to the ground. After that, the continuous whipping left her with no place to hide. At this time, the woman who was screaming miserably was not the beautiful woman who had wantonly waved the long whip in front of outsiders when she had just arrived in the Chu capital. "Dongfang Yu, what are you doing?" A roar came from the door of the courtyard, and Emo Jingli hurried over with Yi Ying. Seeing the scene in front of him, he was so angry that his face turned black. He thought that he had been angry with Dongfang Yu in the morning, and Dongfang Yu was venting his anger on Princess Xixia. Of course, this was the truth. But Dongfang Yu did not care at all about Emo Jingli's anger and smiled provocatively. "Didn't you see? What, as the regent Wang Fei, do I have to ask the prince for permission to discipline a woman who is not even as good as a concubine?" Emo Jingli said coldly, "I already told you in the morning, you do not need to care about the affairs of the Wang Fu." Emo Jingli had come a moment later, and Princess Xixia had already been whipped 6 or 7 times, and her inner garment was torn. Seeing Emo Jingli, it was like seeing a life-saving straw, and hurriedly threw herself into Emo Jingli's arms. "Prince Wu. Prince, you have to uphold justice for Xiar. Dongfang Yu is too much. Xiar is in so much pain." Emo Jingli saw that Princess Xixia was covered in wounds, and his expression became even uglier. Yi Ying, who was following beside him, reminded, "Prince, call the doctor to take a look at Princess Xixia first." Emo Jingli looked at Yi Ying admiringly and then turned and ordered, "Call the doctor. You are not allowed to go." Dongfang Yu's voice sounded from behind. Chapter 890. Impudent. "I have the final say in the princely manner." "It's not up to you to decide," Emo Jingli said coldly. Dongfang Yu tilted his head, looking at Emo Jingli. Suddenly he chuckled softly, looking at him with a smile that was not a smile. "Prince, although Infinite Boundless Mountain's influence has already been mostly wiped out by the Western Tomb and the Prince Ding Mansion, there is still at least 30% left." Emo Jingli said indifferently, "I know. Could it be that you still want to use your Infinite Boundless Mountain's influence to threaten I?" If it was before, Emo Jingli might really be afraid. But now, with only 30% of their influence remaining, while it might be able to cause him some trouble, it was still not enough to make him afraid. Dongfang Yu smiled as he glanced at Princess Xixia. Princess Xixia, who was nestled in Emo Jingli's arms, couldn't help but shiver from this glance, the last trace of blood on her face also vanishing. Dongfang Yu laughed, "Of course not. I just want to tell Prince Li, actually, Infinite Boundless Mountain still has some people in the Prince Ding Mansion. I can give them to the prince. Do you want them?" Emo Jingli's pupils shrank, his sharp gaze shooting straight at Dongfang Yu. The Prince Ding Mansion's security was notoriously tight. It wasn't that no one had tried to plant spies in the Prince Ding Mansion, but those who did either disappeared very quickly, or were ostracized outside, forever unable to obtain any useful information. Dongfang Yu also didn't mind Emo Jingli's gaze, smiling as he raised his brows. "No need to be so surprised. Infinite Boundless Mountain has a foundation of several hundred years after all. They naturally have some secrets that are unknown to others. While they aren't important people, if used well, there will still be unexpected results." Emo Jingli said coldly, "What do you want?" Dongfang Yu pointed at Princess Xixia, saying, "Her. I want the prince to hand her over to me to deal with." Emo Jingli wanted to refuse, but when he opened his mouth he couldn't find the words to say. Princess Xixia grabbed Emo Jingli's clothes in panic. "Prince? Brother Jingli, that woman will kill me." Dongfang Yu looked at Emo Jingli mockingly, as if he was certain that Emo Jingli would not refuse. Dongfang Yu took out a piece of paper from his sleeve and said, "In order to show my sincerity, Prince, can you take a look at my price and see if it's worth it for you to do this?" Emo Jingli took the paper and looked at it with a sullen face, then put it in his sleeve. Princess Xixia's eyes suddenly widened. Brother Emojingli. Seeing the sinister smile on Emojingli's face, Princess Xixia grabbed onto Emojingli's sleeve in horror, as if she didn't believe that Emojingli would really hand her over to Dongfangyu. Dongfangyu smiled proudly and ordered the people around him, pull her back and continue whipping her. The two men in green looked at each other, then stepped forward to drag Princess Xixia to the center of the courtyard. Princess Xixia knew that if she fell into Dongfangyu's hands, she would not be able to survive. She could only hold on to Emo Jingli's sleeve tightly and refused to let go. Brother Jingli, save me. Oh, Prince, save me. Emo Jingli looked silently at the woman in front of him, whose face was filled with horror and despair. Princess Xixia had compensated him for 10 years, gave up her status as a princess, and followed him without any title or status. It would be a lie to say that he had no feelings for her. Although he did not love her, their 10-year relationship was not fake. But, in the end, Emo Jingli could only silently pull away Princess Xixia's hand that was grabbing onto his sleeve. Seeing her slender fingers being pulled away bit by bit, the remaining light in Princess Xixia's eyes gradually disappeared. In the end, Princess Xixia was still dragged to the center of the courtyard. The crack of the whip accompanied by the woman's painful screams rang out. Even the people passing by outside the courtyard could not help but tremble in fear. Save me. Prince Brother Jingli, don't hurt the... Princess Xixia rolled on the ground in pain. After a while, she was beaten until her entire body was covered in blood and she was on the verge of death. Prince, why, save me, no one can save you. Dongfangyu sneered. Didn't you say that your prince likes you? It seems that compared to what I gave him, he likes what I gave him more. His love for you is not even as good as a piece of paper. Hearing Dongfangyu's unrestrained mockery, Princess Xixia only felt dizzy. Other than the burning pain, the memories of the past 10 years slowly floated to her heart. Meeting Emo Jingli's dark eyes again, Princess Xixia suddenly felt like laughing. Emo Jingli's eyes did not have the slightest bit of emotion or pity. What had she been doing for the past 10 years? Princess Xixia laughed softly. She suddenly raised her head, but her face was already covered in tears. Brother Jingli, you're so cruel. Slap. Another whip came. Princess Xixia convulsed in pain, but she still could not stop laughing. Royal sister. Xiar was wrong. Seeing Princess Xixia's miserable state, Yi Ying, who was standing behind Emo Jingli, suddenly felt that even though she was wearing a warm peacock feather cloak, she still felt cold all over. He could not help but take a step back. Looking at the tall and handsome man in front of her, she could not help but want to stay far away from him. Emo Jingli silently looked at Princess Xixia's dying appearance. Finally, his eyes darkened and he turned to leave. Seeing him leave, Ying could not help but want to leave as well. However, she was suddenly afraid of being in the same situation as Emo Jingli. Her legs could not move. She could only stare blankly at the situation in front of her. Seeing Emo Jingli leave, Dongfangyu snorted softly and signaled her subordinates to stop. She walked leisurely to Princess Xixia and looked at her with a smile. How is it? Do you think Emo Jingli still likes you now? How dare you be so presumptuous in front of me? Who do you think you are? I want you to die with grievances. Princess Xixia raised her head. Her slightly red eyes were filled with endless hatred. Dongfangyu, young Master Qingchen will never look at you in the eye in this life. You're a twisted lunatic, a withered flower that no one wants. Even if young Master Qingchen likes a village girl, he will not like a slut like you. I curse you that you will never be able to get him in your lifetime. Beat her to death. I will definitely be married to young Master Qingchen. It's a pity that you won't have the fortune to see that day. Dongfangyu's pretty face darkened as she said sternly. The whip sounded again. Princess Xixia, who had been cursing loudly, gradually fell silent. Princess consort, she's dead. Dongfangyu looked with disgust at the person on the ground whose original appearance was almost unrecognizable. Throw her into a mass grave. Don't bury her. I want her body to be eaten by wild dogs. Everyone in the courtyard could not help but shiver. Even Dongfangyu's own people could not help but show shock and fear in their eyes. Although the previous lords of Infinite Boundless Mountain were not soft-hearted people, after all, even soft-hearted people would not be able to control such a large force. However, there had never been such a ruthless and vicious person. This woman in front of them, Was she really that intelligent and naive young master of infinite boundless mountain? Chapter 891. Ignoring the crowd, Dongfeng Yu snorted and walked outside. When she passed by Ying, she stopped and said in a low voice, "You better behave yourself. Otherwise that bitch will be your role model." Ying was so scared that she took a few steps back and fell on the ground. Clenching her teeth and nodding in horror, Dongfeng Yu curled her lips in disdain. "You're so useless. Are you really Yi Li's sister? Do you think Master Qingshan will like me? If Master Qingshan likes you, wouldn't he be blind and deaf?" But in front of Dongfeng Yu, even if Yi Ying had 10 times the courage, she would not dare to say that. She could only nod vigorously. Dongfeng Yu ignored her and nodded in satisfaction. She turned and left. Seeing Princess Xixia being carried out without any pity, Yi Ying felt weak all over and could not stand up at all. She had fought with Princess Xixia for more than 10 years. She had thought that the woman she was jealous of was Yi Li and the woman she hated the most was Princess Xixia. But she did not expect that the woman who had made her unhappy for 10 years would just die like this. Help me back to my room," Yi Ying said weakly, not daring to stay any longer. Behind her, a pair of steady hands helped her up. An ordinary-looking servant girl dressed in Prince Li's maid uniform carefully helped Yi Ying up and whispered in her ear, "Fourth young miss, don't be afraid. Dongfeng Yu can't hurt you." Yi Ying nodded. "Let's go back first." Everything that had happened today had given Yi Ying too much shock. Not only because of Dongfeng Yu's viciousness, but also because of Mo Jingli's heartlessness. If Mo Jingli could be so heartless to Princess Xixia, who had been doted on for 10 years, then to her who had long fallen out of favor. Yi Ying shivered and staggered back to her own courtyard with the help of the servant girl. In a mass grave somewhere outside Nanjing, a badly mutilated corpse was wrapped in a straw mat and casually thrown into the graveyard. In the cold graveyard, there was only the occasional cawing of the crows, which seemed particularly eerie and terrifying. After a long time, a black shadow appeared in the graveyard. He walked over to the corpse and squatted down to take a look. He checked the pulse and breathing of the badly mutilated corpse. He shook his head and praised, "Good technique." He raised his hand and stuffed a pill into her mouth. He didn't mind that she was bloody and dirty. He carried her and said lightly, "You're lucky to be alive. If you die, at least your corpse won't be exposed in the wilderness." After the man finished speaking, he carried the corpse on his shoulder and swaggered away from the graveyard. In a small courtyard in the city, the lanterns were lit. Yi Li sat under the lanterns and looked at the booklet in her hand. Wei Lin pushed open the door and entered. "Wang Fei." Yi Li put down the booklet and nodded. "How are they?" Wei Lin frowned and said, "Not good. Although the injuries on my body aren't fatal, it's still very dangerous. But since this morning it seemed that she had a high fever. We can't find a doctor as good as Mr. Shin Yang and Dr. Lin in Nanjiang City. If the fever doesn't subside, I'm afraid she won't be able to live." Yi Li said indifferently, "Let's do our best and leave the rest to fate. Get someone to wipe her with strong wine and see if it can subside the fever." Wei Lin nodded and said somewhat uncomprehendingly, "That woman isn't a good person either. Why does Wang Fei have to go to the trouble of saving her?" Yi Li smiled faintly and said, "This time she really suffered an undeserved calamity. Moreover, Princess Xixia is indeed annoying, but she doesn't deserve to die. Also, she is still the sister of the Queen of Nanzhao. If I wasn't in Nanjiang City, it would naturally be fine. But since I am here, I have to do my best for the sake of the Queen of Nanzhao." Wei Lin then understood and nodded. This subordinate understands. No matter what, Wang Fei had saved Princess Xixia. The Queen of Nanzhao had to accept this favor. "Has there been any movement in the Li Prince manor?" Yi Li asked. Wei Lin shook his head. "Not yet. The Li Prince's relationship with Dongfeng Yu is very stiff. He doesn't allow Dongfeng Yu to interfere in the manor's matters. In addition, our Prince Ding mansion still has infinite boundless mountain spies. Dongfeng Yu gave the list to Mo Jingli. However, Li Wang Fei may also know that when Mo Jingli looked at the list, she was standing next to Mo Jingli. It's just that I don't know if she saw it or not. These 2 days she was so scared that she refused to speak." Yi Li nodded. "After all, she is a woman raised in the boudoir. Give her 2 days. Let the people below also check it as soon as possible. Yi Ying is not a professional spy. At that time she may not have gone back to pay attention to the list. In addition, send a copy of the news to first uncle and Xiao Yao. Let them pay attention to it. You can go. Wei Lin said. This subordinate will take his leave. Yi Li's action in Nanjiang City this time was not very low-key. She had a lot of things to do. If she was too secretive, it would easily arouse other people's suspicion. The Chu family was also a famous scholarly family in Dechu State. Now that the young master of the Chu family came to Nanjiang City, it was inevitable that some people would come to visit. Yi Li pushed all of them to her subordinates to receive them. Others only thought that the young master of the scholarly family was arrogant and did not take it seriously. Most of the young masters of famous families always had some temper. Young master Marquis Muyang's residence sent an invitation. At the door of the study, Shuijing was holding an invitation and reported in a low voice. Yi Li returned to her senses from her contemplation. She raised her eyebrows and asked, "What invitation?" Shuijing said, "In 3 days, Nanjiang City will hold an annual chrysanthemum appreciation party. Marquis Muyang's residence sent an invitation." Yi Li smiled helplessly. "Decline it. How can I be in the mood to attend the chrysanthemum appreciation party?" Shuijing whispered, "Yaoji sent the news that Helianjun had arrived in Nanjiang City last night. Mo Jingli and Helianjun may attend the chrysanthemum appreciation party in 3 days. That's why I wanted to ask young master if you want to go." Hearing this, Yi Li's eyes flashed with a trace of coldness. "Helianjun. In that case, let's go and have a look." Shuijing nodded. "Yes, this subordinate will go and prepare immediately." The weather in the south was warmer than the north, but at this time of year, only the chrysanthemum flowers were worth looking at. This chrysanthemum appreciation party could be said to be a big event in Nanjiang City at the end of autumn and the beginning of winter. In the city, whether it was the young masters or the young ladies of the boudoir, they all received invitations to attend. Even ordinary people could stroll around the city's flower market full of chrysanthemums and bring back 2 pots of chrysanthemums for the scenery. Early in the morning, Yi Li brought the slightly disguised Wei Lin and Zhuijing to the scene of the chrysanthemum appreciation party. This was a large courtyard of the Li Palace in Nanjiang City. She took the invitation and went in. As soon as she entered the door, she saw all kinds of chrysanthemums competing with each other. This made the courtyard less bleak in autumn and more colorful and bustling. What surprised Yi Li was that this chrysanthemum appreciation party was actually handed over to Yi Ying, and not Dong Fengyu, who had been in charge of the Li Palace. Perhaps she was frightened by Dong Fengyu. It had been a few days, but Yi Ying's face was still not good. Dong Fengyu sat on one side with an indifferent expression, but he seemed to be absent-minded. All the ladies of Nanjiang City were obviously used to Dong Fengyu's appearance. No one went up to look for trouble. They just surrounded Yi Ying and greeted her. Chapter 892. Yi Li found a place not far away and sat down. She drank the chrysanthemum wine and smiled as if she was looking at the flowers casually. In fact, she had been paying attention to Yi Ying's situation. Wei Lin whispered to Yi Li, "Ever since Dong Fengyu married into the Li Palace, she has not been good at socializing. In the beginning she offended many people. But with Mo Jingli and Dong Fenghui's protection, no one dared to do anything to her. After that, many things in the Li Palace were handled by Princess Xixiao and concubine Xian Zhao. This time Princess Xixiao died. I heard that concubine Xian Zhao was so angry that she was bedridden. That was why concubine Rong was in charge of the overall situation." Yi Li raised her eyebrows and looked at Dong Fengyu from afar. She asked, "Do you think she has changed a lot?" Zhuijing nodded. "She has changed a lot. In the past, Dong Fengyu gave people the feeling that she was self-righteous but did not know anything. But now, even if Dong Fengyu sat there without saying or doing anything, she still gave people a chilling feeling. You could tell by looking at how the women around her all avoided her and squeezed to Yi Ying's side. In fact, Yi Ying was more afraid. If she could, she would have stood up and run away. She did not want to be with Dong Fengyu for a moment. It has been less than half a year. This woman has changed too much." Wei Lin said in disbelief. It was not that people could not change. But Dong Fengyu's change could be said to be 2 extremes. How perverted did she have to be to change so much all of a sudden? Yi Li also sighed. The word love. How can outsiders like us explain it clearly? Mo Jingli is here, Zhuijing whispered. Yili looked up and saw Mo Jingli not far away, surrounded by a group of guards. Walking side by side with Mo Jingli was a man in his 50s, dressed in the clothes of the Central Plains, but his figure and appearance were obviously different from the people of the Central Plains. Although Yili had not really seen Helianjin, she knew that the man walking with Mo Jingli must be Helianjin. Judging from the expressions on their faces, it was obvious that even if the alliance had not been finalized, it should be close. Yili frowned slightly. Although Mo Shuyao had the ambition to wipe out the 3 allied forces in one fell swoop, Yili felt that it was still a bit risky. Even when she came to Jiangnan, she was still considering whether or not she should try to destroy this alliance. However, due to his trust in Mo Shuyao, he suppressed this thought. While Yili was looking at Mo Jingli and the others, Mo Jingli was also looking at Yili and the others. Yili was dressed in white. She was shorter than Zhuo Jing and Wei Lin, who were standing behind her. However, her appearance and aura were far from comparable to the two of them. If they had seen such an elegant young man, they would definitely not forget him. Mo Jingli glanced at him and frowned involuntarily. He asked, "Who is that?" Mo Jingli's guards were all ordinary guards. How could they know the identity of a young man who they had never met before? One of them apologized in a low voice and left to investigate Yili's identity. Yili was confident in her disguise. Seeing Mo Jingli staring at her, she did not avoid him. She stepped forward openly and cupped her hands with a smile. Yunzhou's Chu Junwei greets the regent. Hearing the words Yunzhou, Mo Jingli could not help but frown. When people mentioned Yunzhou, the first thing that came to mind was not that it was a heavenly treasure and was as rich as Jiangnan. Instead, it was the Su family of Yunzhou. Although Mo Jingli did not know who Chu Junwei was, he remembered that the first madam of the Su family's family was surnamed Chu. Moreover, the surname Chu was also a prominent family in Yunzhou. He raised his eyebrows and said, "So it's young Master Chu. How should I address the first young master of the Su family and young Master Chu?" Yili smiled and said, "Prince is too polite. The father of the first madam of the Su family and my grandfather are cousins. Speaking of which, I can barely call young Master Su cousin." This relationship did not seem distant, but it was not close either. There were not many members of the Su family, but the Chu family was an extremely large family in Yunzhou. The main branch of the family, the main branch and the side branch, there were at least a few hundred if not 1,000. Moreover, the first madam of the Su family did not have any direct siblings. After marrying into the Su family, she did not have a close relationship with the Chu family. Therefore, it was a bit difficult for Chu Junwei to have any relationship with the Su family. Mo Jingli nodded and looked at Yili, pushing the faint sense of familiarity to the back of his mind. Dr. Su was a relative of the Su family, so it was not surprising that he had some similarities with Su Qingqian. The Chu family has lived in Yunzhou for a long time. Why did young Master Chu come to Jiangnan? Yili lowered his eyes and smiled bitterly. He said lightly, "Although I am the son of the first wife, I am from a side branch. Moreover, Yunzhou now." He shook his head as if sighing, "There is no reason for me to stay in Yunzhou. Therefore, I wanted to come to Jiangnan to have a look. It's just a trip." "Thank you for your concern, Prince." Mo Jingli looked at him for a long time and did not notice anything wrong. He nodded and said, "In that case, I hope young Master Chu will enjoy himself. The Chu family is also a famous family in Dechu State. If young Master Chu wants to stay in Nanjing and do something for the Dechu State, why don't you come to the regent's residence in 2 days and we can talk?" Yili was stunned. She did not expect that Mo Jingli would want to recruit her. It was just that whether he wanted to recruit Chu Junwei or the Chu family behind him was worth discussing. Although she had no intention of becoming an official, Yili still pretended to be flattered. She cupped her hands and said, "Thank you, Prince. In a few days I will definitely pay you a visit." Helianjin was also there. Mo Jingli naturally could not pay attention to Yili for too long. He nodded and walked with Helianjin into the garden. Helianjin turned around and looked at Yili and the others with some doubt. He smiled and asked, "That young Master Chu seems to be very extraordinary. I did not expect that in Dechu State, other than the immortal young master of the Su family, there would be such a handsome person." Mo Jingli had no intention of talking more. He smiled faintly and said, "The Chu family is a famous family in Dechu State. They have produced many outstanding people in the past. In Dechu State, how can only the young master of the Su family be outstanding?" Helianjin smiled faintly and did not say anything. He turned around and looked back. He saw that handsome young master looking at him with a faint smile. He did not know why, but a feeling of uneasiness suddenly rose in his heart. When he looked again, he saw that young Master Chu had already walked in another direction with 2 guards. In the center of the garden full of chrysanthemums, there was an open pavilion. On the 2nd floor, Mo Jingli and Helianjin sat facing each other. Helianjin drank a mouthful of chrysanthemum wine. He could not help but frown and say, "The wine of your central plains is indeed fragrant, but it does not have the taste of alcohol." The people of the northern tribes loved strong alcohol. Naturally, they would not be interested in a honey wine like the chrysanthemum wine. Mo Jingli did not mind. His expression was indifferent as he sipped the fine wine. He smiled and said, "Strong wine has its benefits, and this chrysanthemum wine also has its benefits. This wine needs to be tasted carefully." Although both sides had a common understanding of the alliance, they still felt disdain for each other in their hearts. The people of the northern tribes looked down on the people of the central plains. The people of the central plains also looked down on the people of the northern tribes. Chapter 893. Helianjin put down his wine cup and frowned. He looked at Mo Jingli and said, "What do you think of my previous proposal?" Mo Jingli was silent. It was not that he deliberately wanted to tempt Helianjin. Mo Jingli was naturally moved by Helianjin's proposal, but it was not so easy to decide if he wanted to go to war with the Prince Ding mansion. Even though Mo Jingli now had the whole of Jiangnan firmly in his hands, he could not guarantee that if he wanted to go to war with the Prince Ding mansion, how many people in the court would support him. Looking at Mo Jingli's hesitant appearance, Helian Pring knew that it was not that Mo Jingli was not moved, but that the bait he offered was not big enough. With Mo Jingli's temperament, as long as the temptation was big enough, he would never consider whether to be the enemy of the Prince Ding mansion or the heavens. After a moment of silence, Helianjin said in a deep voice, "Prince Li, to tell you the truth, before I came to Nanjing, I went to see Genom of Gojoseon." Mo Jingli was startled. He narrowed his eyes and said to Helianjin, "What does General Helian mean?" Helianjin smiled and said, "This time I sincerely want to form an alliance with Prince Li and Genom of Gojoseon. And I have already persuaded Genom of Gojoseon. As long as Prince Li is willing to form an alliance and send troops, Genom of Gojoseon can give up a part of the benefits." Hearing this, Mo Jingli's eyes flashed slightly. But his expression did not change. Instead he sneered and said, "Sincerely form an alliance? I'm afraid the northern tribes can't stand the Prince Ding mansion's attack?" A trace of anger flashed through Helianjin's eyes, but he suppressed it in an instant. He stared at Mo Jingli and said, "At present, the northern tribes are indeed at a disadvantage in the war with the Prince Ding mansion, but Prince Li may not be able to stand it. Our northern tribes has a strong army and strong horses. Even in Dechu state we still have close to 1 million soldiers. Reinforcements from the northern tribes could also arrive any time. Furthermore, what good would it do Prince Li if my northern tribes were to lose?" Mo Jingli's expression turned ugly. If the northern tribes were to be chased out of the north by Mo Shuyao, the Prince Ding mansion would become even more powerful. And from now on the Prince Ding mansion could rightfully occupy the entire northern region. After all, the Prince Ding mansion was no longer related to the Dechu state. The Dechu state threw the northern territory to the northern tribes and the northern territory. Then the Prince Ding mansion flattened the northern territory and chased the northern tribes away. These places naturally had nothing to do with the Dechu state and Mo Jingli. After a long silence, Mo Jingli said in a low voice, "I'm afraid no one in the Dechu state's imperial court will agree to an alliance with the northern tribes and Western Hill." This was what Mo Jingli was most worried about. If the Western Hill and the northern tribes took over the Dechu state's land, the Dechu state's imperial court would not expel the enemy and restore the land. Instead, the northern tribes and Western Hill would ally with the Mahist army. This would be a cause for criticism. Helianjin laughed and said, "I believe these small matters will not be able to stop Prince Li. Let's see if Prince Li wants to defeat Mo Shuyao and destroy the Prince Ding mansion." Mo Jingli was silent, but his mind was already spinning rapidly. He naturally wanted to defeat Mo Shuyao. Ever since he was young, he had dreamed of ruthlessly trampling Mo Shuyao under his feet. Even though his current status was no less than Mo Shuyao's in front of him, he still seemed to be a level lower. Therefore he always hoped that one day he could truly trample Emo Shuyao under his feet, and take back everything that originally belonged to him. If the northern tribes were really defeated by Emo Shuyao, Lei Jinting was already old, and Lei Tingfeng did not seem like he could be Emo Shuyao's opponent. Lei Jinting would probably be defeated by Emo Shuyao once he went to Western Hill. At that time he would not be able to hold the fort alone, and would never have the chance to turn the tables. But now if the allied armies of the three countries pressed on the border, even if Emo Shuyao had the ability to reach the heavens, he would definitely not be able to resist the three countries' 2 to 3 million troops at the same time. Then the chances of victory were still very high. Helianjin smiled as he looked at Emo Jingli's sometimes hesitant and sometimes conflicted appearance, and said with a smile, Genom of Gojoseon has already promised. As long as King Li agrees to send troops, he will immediately withdraw his men from Guangling City and the 4 provinces to the north. This can be considered a show of sincerity to King Li, and also to let King Li's troops pass through without worry. What does King Li think? Emo Jingli tightly gripped the wine cup in his hand, not even noticing that the fragrant chrysanthemum wine had spilled onto his hand. Why is King Li so hesitant? When the 3 of you defeat the Prince Ding mansion, the Dechu state can also return the capital to the Chu capital. Everything that King Li has lost will be returned, and even more. King Li can obtain even more. Helianjin stared fixedly at Emo Jingli and said without stopping. Emo Jingli gritted his teeth and a trace of ruthlessness flashed through his eyes. He said in a low voice, Fine, I will agree to General Hulian's request. The Dechu state will send troops to the north in a few days. Helian Peng was overjoyed and didn't have time to dislike the bland chrysanthemum wine in his cup. He raised his cup and said with a smile, Since that's the case, let's first wish for our army to succeed, and destroy the Mahist army in one fell swoop. Emo Jingli was silent and only raised his head and fiercely poured all the wine in his cup into his mouth. Seeing him like this, Helianjin finally let out a loud laugh. In the garden, amidst the colorful and varied chrysanthemums, countless young masters, princes, scholars, and beauties were reciting poems and making couplets, laughing and talking endlessly. Yili picked up a brush and wrote a poem about chrysanthemums on a rice paper. Rustling west wind fills the courtyard. The cold fragrance of the bud makes it difficult for the cold butterflies to come. If I become the Qing emperor in the future, I will repay the peach blossoms. Slowly finishing the last stroke, Helianjin's complacent laughter reached her ears. Yili put down the brush and said with a faint smile, Looks like the negotiations are successful. Chapter 894. Hearing Yili's words, Zhuojing and Wei Lin both turned to look at the magnificent loft not far away. In terms of internal energy, they were above Yili. If Yili could hear Helianjin's laughter, they could naturally hear it clearly as well. Wei Lin furrowed his brows and said in a low voice, Young master, do you want to? Yili smiled and waved her hand. She carefully picked up the words she had just written and dried them in the direction of the wind, just like any other rich young master in the garden. Although Yili was dressed in white and elegant, causing many young ladies to feel their hearts beat faster and their faces blushed, the 2 bodyguards behind her didn't seem to be any good. However, the 2 guards by his side didn't seem to be friendly people. Many people who wanted to talk to him stopped in their tracks. Zhuojing and Wei Lin looked at the people around them and couldn't help but feel admiration for their princess consort's meticulous planning. Zhuojing's handsome face had a 3-inch-long scar. The sinister scar, coupled with his cold expression, made people tremble with fear. Although Wei Lin had a perfect and handsome face, his head of gray hair coupled with his orchid eyes, made people of all races come and go in Li City. The citizens of Li City were already used to it, but Nanjing City was different. At the very least, it definitely wouldn't be a problem to frighten these young ladies who had been raised in their boudoirs. Although Wei Lin and Zhuojing had previously questioned whether this kind of dressing was too conspicuous and would easily attract attention. However, Yili smiled faintly and said, It's precisely because spies won't attract attention that such a high-profile person naturally wouldn't be a spy. Even if Emo Jingli racked his brains, he would never think that Yili would dress up as a man and appear in front of him. As expected, the 2 bodyguards, coupled with the Chu family's young master's white robes, seemed to have a unique and noble aura that stood above everyone else. Not only did the people who saw them not find it strange, they also naturally thought that this was the style of a young master from a prestigious family. They often praised the Chu family for being a famous family with a long history in Chu state. This young master has written a good poem. Yili put down the scroll in her hand and was about to leave when a familiar female voice came from behind her. When he turned around, he saw Dong Fengyu, who was dressed in white, standing not far away and staring at him. Yili knew that it was her face that had caused the trouble, but she did not care. He had to find a chance to get close to Dong Fengyu. Now that Dong Fengyu was willing to come over, it was naturally the best. With a faint smile, he cupped his hands and said, "Chu Junwei greets the Princess Regent." Hearing the words, "Regent's consort," Dong Fengyu frowned and nodded. Chu Junwei. Was he the young master of the Chu family in Yunzhou? I wonder how the third young master of the Chu family is doing? A trace of doubt appeared on Yi Li's face and she looked at Dong Fengyu with a smile. So the consort knows young Master Wei Yun? However, although I have not interacted much with my brothers in the family these few years, I still remember that Wei Yun is the fourth in the family. Third brother's name is Wei Feng. Yi Li did not care about Dong Fengyu's probing. Since they wanted to deal with Chu Junwei, how could the Prince Ding mansion not have made preparations? Not to mention Chu Junwei's identity, even his parents' life had long been arranged properly. Yi Li naturally remembered clearly who the Chu family was. Dong Fengyu did not mind and said indifferently, "Maybe I remembered wrongly. I met fourth young Master Chu once a few years ago." Yi Li laughed in her heart. Dong Fengyu's words were too shameless. Who did not know that Dong Fengyu had just left the infinite boundless mountain this year? How could he have met Chu Weiyan once a few years ago? What's more, how old was Dong Fengyu a few years ago? Yi Li naturally would not expose her words. She smiled gently and said, "What can I do for the consort?" Dong Fengyu was silent. In fact, she did not know what she wanted to say. But when she passed by, she saw the faint smile on the face of the young master in white. Somehow she thought of another man who seemed to always be in white. She could not help but speak. After a moment of silence, Dong Fengyu said, "Young Master Chu has lived in Yunzhou. Now that he has just arrived in Nanjing, if there is any inconvenience, you can send someone to the Prince Regent's mansion to find me." Yi Li was slightly startled and immediately said with a smile, "The consort is too polite." "Thank you, consort. If there is any trouble, I will have to trouble the consort." Dong Fengyu looked at her in a daze and said faintly, "If he is like you." Halfway through she suddenly realized and the rest of the words naturally did not need to be said. Yi Li just pretended not to hear and smiled gently. "Consort, if there is nothing else, I will leave first." Dong Fengyu nodded and said, "Sorry to disturb you. I will also leave first." "Consort, please take care." Yi Li bowed and said. Looking at Dong Fengyu's back, Jing said with some confusion, "Young master, this Dong Fengyu seems a little abnormal." "It's not just abnormal." Wei Lin opened his mouth and said, "The way she looked at young master just now clearly made one's hair stand on end. Fifth young master is right. Eldest young master is really unlucky to have provoked such a woman." Looking at the way Dong Fengyu looked at the consort, even outsiders like them could not help but feel their hearts tremble. It was rare that the consort could still maintain such a calm expression. More importantly, the consort was a stranger whom they had only met once, and who was somewhat similar to young Master Qingchen. If she were to face young Master Qingchen, Wei Lin could not help but shudder. He hoped that young Master Qingchen had not seen such a Dong Fengyu. Yi Li sighed softly and said with some regret, "One thought to become a Buddha, another to become a demon." Jing said, "Young master means that this Dong Fengyu actually became a demon because she could not love eldest young master?" Yi Li closed the fan in his hand and said, "In short, we have to find eldest brother as soon as possible." Looking at Dong Fengyu now, she probably can't take it anymore. Let the people following Dong Fengyu keep a close eye on her. "Yes," Jing replied. Prince Regent's residence in the study, Dong Fengyu looked expressionlessly at Mo Jingli, who was full of self-satisfaction, but her mind had already drifted to an unknown place. Mo Jingli stopped and glanced at Dong Fengyu, who was obviously in a daze. A trace of displeasure flashed across his face. Now Mo Jingli's impression of Dong Fengyu could not be any lower. If possible, Mo Jingli could not wait to kill this woman in front of him. This woman had power that everyone envied and coveted, but she did not do anything and only threw herself at a man who did not even open his eyes to look at her. Not only did she use all her means, but she also became crazy, vicious and ruthless. If not for the fact that he did not want to have a conflict with Dong Fengyu, Emo Jingli really wanted to tell Dongfang Yu that as a man, the more she pestered him, the more Su Qingchen would hate her. I have already decided to form an alliance with Xi Ling and the northern tribes. Where did you hide young Master Qingchen? Give him to me immediately, I have a use for him. Emo Jingli suppressed the anger in his heart and said in a low voice. When he dared to capture Su Qingchen, it was not to give him to this woman to be infatuated with. Su Qingchen could be said to be the third important person in the Prince Ding mansion after Emo Shuyao and Yi Li. With him in hand, many things were much more convenient. Chapter 895. Dongfang Yu's eyes flashed and she said unhappily, I said I don't know. Emo Jingli sneered, do you think I'm a fool? Dongfang Yu, I am giving you face now. Jiangnan is I's place. Do you think I can't find him if you don't say I? Seeing Emo Jingli like this, Dongfang Yu was no longer polite. She said coldly, then I'm warning you. If you dare to touch a hair of his, don't blame me for being rude. Emo Jingli now understood Dongfang Yu's character. He took a deep breath and said mockingly, even if you don't give him to me, what do you want to do? Lock him up for life? Do you think all the people in the Prince Ding mansion are dead? Maybe the people in the Prince Ding mansion are already looking for him all over Jiangnan. With the ability of the shadow guards in the Prince Ding mansion, how much time do you think they need? Dongfang Yu was silent for a while. She looked up at Emo Jingli and said proudly, don't waste your time. As long as I don't want to, no one can find him. Emo Jingli finally couldn't stand it anymore. He glared at Dongfang Yu for a long time before he said coldly, Dongfang Yu, you can die with Su Qingchen in your arms. I'm afraid that Su Qingchen won't even want to die with you. After that he didn't care about what Dongfang Yu said. He turned and slammed the door of the study. Emo Jingli walked quickly into the Li Palace. Just by looking at his back one could see the anger in his eyes. His confidants behind him looked at each other worriedly and asked carefully, Prince, about the princess. Emo Jingli paused and said in a low voice, don't worry about her. She wants to go out in the future, let her go. I want to see how long she can endure it. The person behind him nodded and said, Prince is wise. She can't endure it for long because of her feelings for Master Qingchen. We are right behind her like the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Although he had no feelings for Dongfang Yu, she was still his legal wife. Dongfang Yu's infatuation with young Master Qingchen was exposed by his subordinate. Emo Jingli's face darkened even more. He snorted and left in a huff. Emo Jingli was busy with the alliance with West Hill and the northern tribes. He did not have much time to pay attention to Dongfang Yu and only sent people to keep an eye on her. Meanwhile, in the imperial court, Emo Jingli had suddenly thrown out a powerful bomb, causing an uproar. Even those who supported Emo Jingli could not help but look at the regent, who was full of self-satisfaction as if they were looking at a madman, not to mention those old officials who had a good impression of the Prince Ding mansion. Emo Jingli had just dropped the news of forming an alliance with the northern tribes of Western Tomb. Before he had the chance to talk about his great ambitions and plans, someone from the Highness stood up and said in a low voice, Prince, you can't do this. Emo Jingli looked at the person in front of him and his face immediately darkened. Emo Jingli had dealt with the Empress Dowager's party for so long. If he still did not know who was supporting the Empress Dowager, Emo Jingli would have lived in vain all these years. Emo Jingchi had a falling out with the Empress Dowager when he was alive. Many of the Empress Dowager's original supporters had been removed by him. Under such circumstances, there was no one else other than the Prince Ding mansion that could keep the Empress Dowager in and out of the imperial court. Therefore, Emo Jingli directly regarded the Empress Dowager's people as Emo Shuyao's people. Naturally, he wanted to skin them alive and pull out their tendons. He looked coldly at the Highness's people and asked, why not? The minister who stood up said seriously, West Hill and the northern tribes invaded our territory and killed our people. As the regent of the Dechu state, the prince is in charge of the Dechu state. How can he form an alliance with them? What's the difference between this and acknowledging a thief as your father? How dare you? Emo Jingli was so angry that his face darkened. He angrily rebuked. Lord Wang is absolutely right. Prince, please reconsider. Everyone said in unison. Emo Jingli looked carefully and saw that more than 80% of the courtiers had knelt in agreement. Even the remaining 20% had expressions of disapproval. Actually, when Mo Jingli had originally agreed to form an alliance with West Hill and the northern tribes, he knew that this would be the result. But when he saw that so many people were against him, the feeling that the entire world was against him still made Mo Jingli furious. He stared coldly at the courtiers kneeling in front of him and said, "West Hill and the northern tribes are enemies of the Dechu state? Is the Prince Ding mansion not an enemy? Isn't the land that Mo Shuyao is occupying Dechu state? I want to know, are you loyal to the Dechu state or the Prince Ding mansion?" Such heart-wrenching words immediately made many of the old courtiers in the court feel a chill in their hearts. Many of these old courtiers had served 2 or even 3 dynasties. If not for their loyalty to the Dechu state, they would have directly sought refuge with the Prince Ding mansion. Even if they could not obtain important positions, they could at least live out their old age peacefully. But now, because they had disobeyed King Li's wishes, they had been labeled as disloyal to the Dechu state. How could they not feel disheartened? Moreover, King Li's decision to form an alliance with West Hill and the northern tribes was a huge mistake. No matter who won or lost in the end, they would go down in infamy. We do not have such intentions, but we cannot form an alliance with West Hill and the northern tribes. Regent, please reconsider. The courtiers said in unison. Mo Jingli waved his sleeve unhappily and said, "I have already made up my mind. There is no need to discuss it further." As he said this, Mo Jingli's gaze swept over the little emperor who was sitting on the dragon throne with tears in his eyes because of the sudden change in atmosphere. A dark light flashed through Mo Jingli's eyes. He walked to the little emperor's side and asked in a low voice, "Emperor, what do you think of Ai's decision?" The little emperor Mo Jingli had always been afraid of this regent royal uncle. Being stared at by Mo Jingli, he immediately burst into tears. Mo Jingli glanced at him with disgust and roared in a low voice, "What are you crying for? You are the emperor. Acting like this in front of the courtiers is not proper. I am asking you a question." The little emperor was so frightened that he choked. His tear-filled face immediately turned red. He choked and said, "Royal uncle." "Woo, what royal uncle said is right." Mo Jingli snorted softly and glanced at the people below. "Did you hear that? This is the emperor's intention. You don't want to respect Ai's decree. Could it be that you also want to disobey the emperor's decree?" The courtiers were speechless. The little emperor was only 8 or 9 years old. Moreover, he had been frightened by Mo Jingli for the past 2 years. Even if the Empress Dowager tried her best to teach him, it was useless. He was even worse than an ordinary 8 or 9-year-old child. But what could they say? That the emperor was still young and insensible? That what he said did not count? A few old courtiers could only secretly lament in their hearts that the young emperor was isolated and the powerful courtiers were stealing the country. "Li Wang, what do you want to do?" The Empress Dowager walked out from the back of the hall and coldly looked at her only son. When Mo Jingli saw the Empress Dowager come out, his face sank. He faintly said, "The imperial harem cannot interfere with politics. Why did imperial mother come to the court at this time?" When the little emperor saw the Empress Dowager, the tears that had just stopped flowed out again. He looked at the Empress Dowager and cried loudly, "Woo, royal grandmother. Grandson is afraid." Looking at Mo Jingli's cold eyes, the Empress Dowager only felt her vision turn black. She only had Mo Jingli, this one son, left. If possible, how could she not want to live in harmony with her own son? But when Mo Jingchi passed away, the two of them were too tense. In these 2 years, the Empress Dowager increasingly understood that in the eyes of this son, her position as imperial mother was not as high as his aunt, the virtuous old concubine. The Empress Dowager had been high and mighty all her life. How could she tolerate the son that she had raised to take away her power and be raised in the palace to look at other people's faces? After that, Mo Jingli had the help of the boundless mountain and was against the Empress Dowager's people everywhere. The relationship between mother and son became more and more tense. Chapter 896. However, the Empress Dowager did not come out this time to argue with Mo Jingli. She really did not understand what was going on in her son's mind. Indeed, the Empress Dowager had once wanted to deal with the Prince Ding mansion. However, even when the Prince Ding mansion was at its weakest, the Empress Dowager had never thought of going against the Prince Ding mansion openly. She had followed the late emperor and watched him spend half his life trying to deal with the Prince Ding mansion, but failed every time. He also saw how talented Mo Lufang was back then and how stunning she was. She had also seen how her eldest son did not hesitate to sacrifice the Dechu state to suppress the Mahist army. She had also seen how Mo Xiuyao pushed the Prince Ding mansion back to its peak from the crippled prince who had been in imminent danger. Unconsciously, the Empress Dowager had a feeling that the Prince Ding mansion was not something that ordinary people could deal with. Most importantly, even if the allied forces of the three families really destroyed the Prince Ding mansion this time, so what? Would Xiling and the northern tribes push out the land of the Dechu state? Of course not. Without the Mahist army's deterrence and restraint, they would only crazily annex the land of the Dechu state. She was afraid that she would not even have a peaceful life in her lifetime. Mo Jingli did not know what the Empress Dowager was thinking. He only saw that the Empress Dowager as his birth mother had gone against him in all these years. She even did not hesitate to rely on the Prince Ding mansion to help Mo Xiuyao restrain him. At this time, seeing that the Empress Dowager wanted to stop his good deed, he said coldly, "Mother, as a member of the harem, it is better for you to return to the palace and rest. The matters of the imperial court will naturally be handled by me and the ministers." Or could it be that Imperial Mother really wanted to get involved in politics? I still remember brother's portrait. Mo Jingli, you. The Empress Dowager was so angry that her entire body trembled. The portrait Mo Jingli had left behind before his death was a taboo in the Empress Dowager's heart. Now that Mo Jingli had brought it out with such fanfare, there was even a faint hint of threat. The Empress Dowager finally couldn't take it anymore. Her vision turned black and her body fell backward. Mo Jingli glanced at the Empress Dowager who had fainted on the ground and coldly ordered, "Imperial Mother is sick. Why haven't you sent her back for the imperial physicians to treat her? If you let the Empress Dowager walk around and hurt her body, I will ask you." Seeing the Empress Dowager being helped down, the hope in the hearts of the ministers was once again shattered. Mo Jingli looked down at the crowd and said, "Mo Xiuyao led hundreds of thousands of Mahist army to occupy the northwest, northeast and Chu capital. He has long since betrayed the Dechu state and is the greatest traitor in the world. I formed an alliance with the West Hill and the northern tribes in order to eradicate the rebels and help the country. If anyone has any objections, they will be punished for treason." After that, he no longer paid attention to the ministers and the pitiful little emperor, and left in a huff. In Nanjing, the most discussed topic these days was the alliance between Prince Li and the West Hill and the northern tribes to fight against the Mahist army. Among them, there were many respected elders who cried to the sky in broad daylight, saying that the Dechu state was doomed. Although the Mahist army and the Dechu state no longer had any relationship in the eyes of many elders, it was not so easy to cut off all ties. There were many people who wholeheartedly hoped that the Prince Ding mansion would help the country and save the Dechu state. Even if it wasn't for this, the Prince Ding mansion had protected the Dechu state for hundreds of years. Even after being driven away by the royal family, it could be said that they had never done anything wrong to the Dechu state. The Prince Regent's actions were heartless, ungrateful and immoral. Wasn't such an imperial court abandoned by the heavens? At the same time, the common people also scolded this. Although Mo Jingli wanted to ban it, he was already in trouble both internally and externally. It made his head hurt. If he forcibly banned the common people's speech, he was afraid that the officials would really force the people to rebel. Left with no choice, Mo Jingli decided that what the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve. At the same time, he issued orders to mobilize the army and prepare for the upcoming expedition to the north. In a quiet tea house, Yili sat in a side room and drank tea with a smile. Although the door was closed, the discussions of the customers outside still flowed into the side room. It could be seen how intense the debate outside was. This situation did not only appear in this inn, but also in all the other tea houses and restaurants in Nanjing. The common people did not care about the imperial court, so naturally the noise became more and more intense. There were many people who scolded Mo Jingli all day long. "Master, what do you think of these people's words?" In the side room, Yaoji sat opposite, looking at the leisurely man in white in front of her with a smile. Yili smiled faintly. "I'm afraid these will not affect Prince Li's decision." Yaoji tilted her head in thought and could only sigh. Isn't Prince Li's hatred for the Prince Ding mansion an obsession? If Prince Li really sees it clearly, he should know that the alliance with the West Hill and the northern tribes is not good for him. No matter whether the Mahist army wins or loses, he will go down in infamy. Unfortunately, Mo Jingli was too obsessed with defeating Mo Shuyao. So even if there was only a slight chance, he wanted to see Mo Shuyao defeated in front of him. Marquis Muyang's mansion has also received Prince Li's order. Marquis Muyang and Muyang will go to war together. Yaoji said softly. Yi Li nodded, not surprised. There were not many generals in Dechu state who were good at war. Leng Huai and Marquis Nan had already submitted to the Prince Ding mansion. Although Murong Shen did not express it clearly, his actions had already proved his thoughts. Moreover, Murong Shen was not only Mo Liufang's old subordinate, but also the father-in-law of Leng Haoyu, Prince Ding's confidant. It was inseparable from the Prince Ding mansion. Although Marquis Muyang was old, Leng Huai and Marquis Nan, who were about the same age as him, were still dominating the battlefield. Naturally, he would not have any problems. Since Mo Jingli has already decided, then I should give him a generous gift. Yi Li smiled faintly and took out a list from her sleeve and placed it in front of Yaoji and Qin Feng. Yaoji picked it up and looked at it and asked doubtfully, "Master, this is..." Yi Li said in a low voice, "Kill all the people on this list." Yi Li's voice was neither happy nor angry. It was as calm as the surface of the sea, but it made people feel the danger of the deep sea. The people on this list were all important figures in Dechu State's army. Perhaps they were not in a high position, but they would have a big impact on the army if they left. But what made Yaoji feel strange was that Muyang and Marquis Muyang's names were not on the list. Yi Li looked at her and smiled faintly. "Don't be surprised. This time, Marquis Muyang and his son will definitely become the commander-in-chief of the Chu army. If something happens to them, it will be a problem whether the Chu army can still set off. Mo Jingli has already gotten involved, so don't even think about getting out. These people are not important or conspicuous, just get rid of them. Big Brother is still in Dongfang Yu's hands, don't attract attention." Qin Feng put away the list and nodded. "Don't worry, Master." Yi Li nodded and asked, "Is there any news about Yi Ying? Does she know about the list that Dongfang Yu gave to Mo Jingli?" Yaoji hesitated and said in a low voice, "She knows, but she won't say." Yi Li was slightly startled and pondered for a moment before nodding. "I know what she means. She is afraid that I will go back on my word and not tell her the whereabouts of the child." Yaoji asked, "Then should we try to..." That you're tuning in to the Biao's Wuxiao Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.